Well, it was all fun and games whenever the Blues were winning. Blues lose 4-2 yesterday during our show. They lose 5-2 on Saturday against the Nashville Predators. And Alex, despite the mockery that T-Bone just had with that open.
Unnecessary.
I don't appreciate it, good sir.
Trash.
I still feel fine. I'm over here sipping my martini once again on Good Vibes Island
I don't know
with
if we
the
want
St.
you on
Louis
this.
Blues. I feel fine. You know why? Because I knew this team was bad at 5-on-5. I knew this team was potentially going to have some costly mistakes, either in their own end or on the power play that lead to goals going the other direction. I knew this team was incredibly up and down. We're going on this roller coaster together, and it's fun when you're going down, and it's less fun when you're on the way back up. And that's where we're at right now, man. This has been the case all season. This team got its coach fired earlier this year.
Well, you know what it is. You probably should fire this coach because they're not listening to the message. And
who's the AHL coach now?
That's the answer. Daniel Tkachuk. We've talked to him. He's a great guy. Bring him up.
Bring him up. Yeah. He'll be ready to. No, I think they're going to be fine, man. They had a really poor couple of games. Saturday was rough. Saturday was a. I love Jordan Kyrou. That's my guy on this show. Rough day for my guy, Jordan Kyrou.
I was in a hospital room, and I preferred not to watch the third period of that game.
Yeah, the experience of just people watching was better for you in terms of walking the halls.
Not worth it.
It was a rough couple of games, and I understand if you're down on them after these two games, they lost all of the goodwill that they had built up. As Kerber said in that final call, you heard that right here on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. I get it. I don't blame you for it. But, Alex, I can't get there. I want to see what they look like against New York on Thursday. I want to see what they look like this weekend against Detroit. They have built up enough goodwill for me with their 8-2 stretch that losing 3 out of 4 is not going to harm that for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not what you want to see. Like, I don't really care about the Toronto Maple Leafs game. Like, it's an Eastern Conference matchup. You probably weren't favored in that one anyway. I don't care. The Nashville Predators one is the one that hurts because that's the game that you'd expect your team to be fired up for. And frankly, Nashville was more desperate than you. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go on the radio after what we talked about Friday and be like, no, this team sucks. Let's trade them all away. Oh, I still think exactly what I said on Friday they should do. I think you should invest in this roster. Guess what their problem was versus Nashville and versus Toronto? You couldn't score any goals at even strength. You turned the puck over defensively. I think this team showed on Saturday and yesterday exactly what we knew about this team at the beginning of the season. They were going to be average. You were going to be good for a little bit. You were going to be bad for a little bit. You won 8 out of 10 games against some very good opponents. Vancouver, Seattle, Calgary, the LA Kings, the Edmonton Oilers. You picked up a lot of victories. Yeah, you laid eggs against the Columbus Blue Jackets, against Toronto twice, and Nashville. But you did what you needed to do. You put yourself in a position to succeed. You put yourself in a position to where destiny is in your hands of making the playoffs. And you've only lost 2 games in a row, 3 separate times with Drew Bannister. So you have not gone into a losing skid. You have found ways to get your head right following a couple of bad games. So, no, I'm not going to blow the horn right now and say that this team's bad and they're going to miss the playoffs. They might miss the playoffs. But right now, they have shown the ability to win a couple of games, lose a couple of games, put together some victories, put together some points. And frankly, guys, the Western Conference is just bad. Like, the Western Conference is not dangerous. So you're fine. You're in a good position to just figure it out as you go along.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I'm not too concerned because this team's kind of done this roller coaster effect all year. You know, they've won a couple, they win 2, they lose 2. They win 1, they lose 1. And I feel like this is just a continuation of that. And the reason they have kind of some breathing room is because of what you mentioned. They just went on a winning streak, and we've been preaching for that all year long. Long as this doesn't snowball into like a 5-game, 6-game losing streak, I think the Blues are fine. Though it is disappointing they didn't show up in a game that really mattered. That was really a 4-point swing against the Nashville Predators. Outside of that, like I didn't have much takeaway from it. I'm not too concerned. I'd be more concerned if this was like game number 5 that they'd lost in a row.
Now that's bigger picture. I think there are elements of the team that are concerning, and a lot of it is circled around the offense. Like even strength, we've talked about it, BK, since December, your even strength numbers have been bad. Like if you look at the amount of shots on goal that you're producing, like 27 in the NHL per game, which is like bottom 5, compared to the goals that you're scoring, you'd probably say you're getting a little lucky. You're getting to the dirty areas and you're getting some good bounces. But to me, you don't really have a top line right now. I think you've got one player that's playing like a top line, and your depth of scoring is gone. Yesterday, Drew Bannister demoted 2 guys that are making more than $3 million a year to your fourth line. That's more of a problem internally, but big picture, the team's exactly what I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I mean, for the 5-on-5 conversation, because I know this is going to be something that gets brought up elsewhere, and it should. Like, the Blues are not a good 5-on-5 team, guys.
Right.
This has not been something that changed under Bannister. We've been looking for, okay, why is it working now? Why are they winning? And the truth is, it's just special teams.
Yeah,
That's it. That's the only real difference. They're getting really good goaltending at 5-on-5, which is essentially buying them time. 5-on-5 for the Blues is, how do we get to the end of this game? And then on the power play, you score your goals. And on the penalty kill, again, you rely on your goalie. You have some good penalty killers on this team. You keep the puck out of the back of the net. Boom, you win games 3-1, 3-2, etc. Here are some recent shots on goal at 5-on-5 for the Blues. 14, 12, 18, 15, 18. Here are some other recent shots on goals for the Blues. 13, 14, 12. Can you tell me which one of those was the losses and which one of those was the wins?
No, I actually
Probably
can't.
Tough, right?
They all sound very similar.
They're all the same. The Blues aren't getting shots on goal. They're not getting scoring chances. They're not getting high danger chances because they're just not very good at it right now at 5-on-5. They haven't been all season long, and it's why the nerdy numbers would tell you this team isn't very good. But when we watch them, we look like we feel like they're a little bit better.
Yeah, because we watch them, they look better. But you're right, 5-on-5, they're not. They're not the same.
I was trying to get you to help me
I
out
thought
here.
you were getting to your point, and when you pointed at me, I'm like, what are you doing, man? I forgot you were gagging over there.
Come on.
Go ahead, T-Bone.
It's the fill-up. We got to fill time while he's figuring his stuff out over
Take a
there.
hit, man. I'm over
Typically
here
you kind
dying.
of do this, where you like, you
No, what does that
stretch, you
mean?
stretch.
No,
Not just point at somebody.
I think he's 100% right, though, because 5-on-5, they are the same team. I mean, the numbers say it. Nothing's changed outside of the special teams. And we talked about it. What would this team look like if they had a good power play under Berube? And we said that, they'd probably be a good team. Well, guess what? They're doing that now. Nothing's changed at 5-on-5, but the power play's good. And it's what allowed them to go on that winning streak that propelled them into at least right now, the playoff picture.
And it's just the offense. I mean, like, defensively, and I know people are going to laugh at this, but I think they've been better defensively than what anybody expected them to be with this set of players. Like your goaltending. Look, your goaltending in both of these losses over the weekend, they had one goal that you'd say, you probably needed that save. But otherwise, we're talking about a team that is only scoring goals on the power play. We're talking about a team that's not going to the quote-unquote dirty areas like they did against Edmonton. And we're talking about a team that offensively, you're trying to get the best out of a couple of pieces that weren't wanted on other teams. So, like, that's where they're at, which I don't think is a bad thing. The hard part is putting it all into perspective, because when you talk about playoffs, you talk about, well, you expect your team to start winning. When we're talking about playoffs with this Blues team, that was the ultimate goal. And if you're getting there because your power play is carrying you for a little bit, just like you got to this point because your goaltending carried you for a little bit, you hope that the even strength offense figures itself out, which, as I started the show, I'm not going to backtrack from what I said on Friday. I think the team should invest in offense at the trade deadline. I think the team should go out there and look for another top 6 winger, because they've got other areas that can win them hockey games.
Yeah, when you look at what this Blues team has done, let's go back to January 1st, right? Since the start of the calendar year. You're 5th in the Western Conference in points percentage. You're 2nd in the Western Conference in power play percentage. Those two things are correlated. The fact that your power play has been the second best behind only Edmonton in the West, that is why you have the 5th best record in the Western Conference over this stretch of games. If you look at what you've done in terms of goals for at 5-on-5 since the start of the new year, only the LA Kings, Columbus Blue Jackets, and Chicago Blackhawks have been worse. That's it. Those are the only teams in the NHL that have fewer goals at 5-on-5 than
the Kings?
you. Yep.
Well, they got their coach
since the
fired.
start of the new year. Yeah, and those teams are a team that got its coach fired, 2 teams that are the worst in the NHL in Columbus and Chicago, and then right there with the Blues is the Pittsburgh Penguins, who,
they're in the exact same spot as the Blues, by the way, a middling team that wasn't sure if they were going to make the playoffs.
That's where you're at. That is who this team is. And if you don't believe in that, if you say, that's why I've never bought into the Blues, dude, I get it. Because for the vast majority of the season, that is where I have been at for this team. But I've now said all all of that aside, all of my doubts aside, not because I believe that this team is a Stanley Cup contender, because I don't. I don't think this team can do that. But because when I look around the West, to your point, Alex, it's not that the West is bad at the top. I think the West is fine at the top. It's that the middle of the West isn't very good. And the other teams in the West that are in the middle right now, many of them are incentivized to sell. Like the Calgary Flames, what do we think they're going to do at the trade deadline? Do we think they're going to add, or do we think they're likely to sell some of their assets?
Selling everything.
Exactly. The Nashville Predators, do I think they're going to be a team that is adding significant capital to their... No, I think they're more likely to trade Jussi Saros than they are to add a significant piece to their team. So you look at where the Blues are at, and their real competition is the Kings, who fired their coach recently, the Seattle Kraken, and the Minnesota Wild.
Mm-hmm.
The Minnesota Wild fired their... Like, these are all the same teams. So I'll go ahead and buy into the team with the goalie that I believe can go ahead and win you some games and steal games for you down the stretch. That doesn't mean they're great, but it means they might be good enough in this version of the Western Conference.
The other part of it, too, and why I'm not so negative Nancy today, and I know, save your text talking about how, of course, I'm optimistic about the Blues. Wait till we get to the Cardinals. Yeah, you just wait.
But unbelievable.
We'll get there.
The game against Toronto yesterday, like, let's look at it. 2 turnovers are the reason that you lost that hockey game. The turnover that you had in the offense or in the defensive zone where Nick Leddy lost the puck along the boards that turned into Matthew Nye scoring the goal, and then you turned the puck over on the power play to give William Nylander a breakaway. Otherwise, you're talking about a 1-1 hockey game in the third period.
That's the biggest thing to me. The stuff that showed up early this season that lost you games, that's what's showing up right now. In the last couple of games, you have lost. It's the old Bill Belichick quote, right? There are more teams that lose games than win games. And what I mean by that is you cost yourself goals. And that's what the Blues did over the last 2 games. They found a way to essentially score for the opposition. They made it too easy. You've got to make it harder on your opponents. Just add 5-on-5 hell when you're on the power play. Don't give the puck to the other team. There have been so many terrible turnovers. Just passes that had no intent behind it. Ollie Marmol always talks about the intent behind pitches, right? Having the knowing what you're trying to accomplish with the pitch that you're throwing. The Blues don't seem to have any sort of intent behind their passes. They're just like, oh, your turn. Oh, here, you go do something with it now. Oh, no, now you. And there's no like, here, I'm passing it to you so you can then go there, which will open up this. That is what needs to return. That was there a couple of games ago. So just wash these couple of games away. Get yourself back on track. Don't allow 2 to become 4 or 5 or 6 losses. And if you're able to get on the right side of the ledger once again, this team's going to be fine. They're going to get back on track. And by the March deadline, we will get to the place where, once again, Doug Armstrong is having difficult decisions. But if they don't, if they continue playing the way that they did over the last 2 games, then Doug Armstrong's decisions will not be difficult. They will have made the decision for him, and this team will be a seller again. But my hope, my belief is that that will not be the case. And we get to the trade deadline, and this team is on one side or the other. They are firmly in the middle of whether or not they are a buyer. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. I'm playing hurt today, boys. I'm fighting through a little bit of a man cold.
Clearly.
Hit me hard over the weekend.
Oh, that's what that point meant.
Yeah,
So
like
I need
that.
kill time here, right here? Okay, cool.
No, I'm good. So if you hear any coughing throughout the day, I apologize genuinely. It is not something that I enjoy doing. Okay, we didn't need that. I am trying my best. I've got a lot of water over here. I've got some cough drops. I will do my best, but just bear with me as we try to get through the show today. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider, will join the show. We've got questions and answers at 11:45. You guys can get involved for that or for anything else throughout the show today at 314-399-9646. You can always watch on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is where the YouTube chat is taking place. The Graveyard is available for all of you to be a part of.
Graveyard.
Coming up next, Nolan Arenado and Miles Mikolas finally said the quiet part out loud over the weekend. We'll talk about it. Yeah, more leadership talk next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at 100 West Dental. I have officially found the dentist that I trust. And look, that means something for me because when you go to a dentist every 6 months regularly, you put a lot of trust in them, making sure that they're taking care of your teeth, your gums, your tongue, your overall health. Because what you might think is just something that you just do, man, it has some overlying and lasting impact to your overall health. And that's what I get with Dr. Pryor and his team over at 100 West Dental. When it comes close to their office off of Manchester. It's brand new. They got all up-to-date, state-of-the-art technology. And what I love about it is what I mentioned, the preventative procedures that they take, making sure that you're in good shape. And right now they're offering a great deal, an Invisalign package where if you mention my name, Alex Ferrario, they'll take $1,000 off of it. And I had a buddy who just checked this one out, and they said that when it comes to the digital scanner, the simulation that it does, showing what your teeth will look like before Invisalign, boy, it forces you into making that great deal. So go check them out. Find out why I love going to my dentist, because I've got the trust factor at 100 West Dental. Get with the best over at 100 West.
Some things have gotten blown out of proportion with some of the things we've said or I've said. I think I am a leader. I'm a leader by example. I'm not a vocal guy, and I'm just following the leads of people I've seen. I know I could lead. I could be vocal, but there's a proper way to do it. The more you talk, the more people start to. It's just one ear, not the other. So there's got to be a proper time, and I feel like I do that. I'll share my thoughts when I need to.
That was Nolan Arenado on Bally Sports Midwest over the weekend, talking about the leadership quote that he had that certainly gained a lot of attention. And I think it should have, because it came off really poorly. And I think Nolan Arenado now realizes, okay, that came off poorly. Now, the thing is, I think he meant what he said. I don't think when he talked about how, hey, the young guys came in and overran the clubhouse last year and they needed to bring in Matt Carpenter because he and Paul Goldschmidt are overly talkative, and Matt Carpenter is somebody that can go up and actually talk to these guys and hold them accountable. I think Nolan Arenado believes that. And that is something that you can't just, take back. No, that comment was there. It was real. It's something you believe. Now let's address it. So Nolan Arenado talked with a bunch of different media types over the weekend, and he said a lot of stuff, right? And most of it was pretty similar to what he had said on Friday. I thought there was one quote, though, from Nolan Arenado at the end of Derek Gould's story over the weekend that stood out the most to me. He said the following: "It's very simple. I want to be better this year than last year from an individual standpoint. From a team standpoint, I want the best for them. I know when I'm playing the way that I should and feeling the way that I should, I can help this team win a lot of games." That is the point.
Man, all you had to do was just say that and end it.
Miles Mikolas then was on foul territory yesterday and said a whole lot about, hey, it's difficult to connect with young guys. They're more on social media. They're not into playing ping pong or going playing golf or playing a game of spades, any of that. Like, it's tougher as an older guy, older veteran on the team to be able to connect with some of the younger players. Alex, we've heard this on the Blues as well. This is not something that's new. This has been a tale as old as time.
Didn't we hear that from Josh Allen this season with the Bills,
Stafford.
too? Oh, Stafford, that's who it was.
And then he had a great year with the young rookie.
Yeah. I do understand it. Like, I get it. That's probably, there's a lot of truth in that.
I can't connect with T-Bone.
Then he said this, and I think this gets to the heart of it.
I might have not done a great job with it last year, admittedly, because I was having a rough season. So I didn't want to be bothered by younger guys or this or that. And I might have been in my own space. So there's things that I can be better at to connect with the younger guys and try to help them, try to learn stuff from them.
Let's just be honest about this, guys. The reason Arenado and Goldie and Mikolas might have had a down year when it came to their leadership, they stunk. They weren't very good on the field. Those guys expect more from themselves. So when you're trying to work on yourself to better yourself, you know what you don't have a whole lot of time of? Nonsense. You don't have a lot of time to go talk to the 22-year-old that's having his first cup of coffee in the big leagues and is asking you a question that is so rudimentary that you just have that as like a piece of your day that is a part of your routine. And it has been that for a decade if you're Nolan Arenado, or a decade if you're Paul Goldschmidt. Now, should it be that way? I don't know. The best players in baseball probably have a little bit more time for that. But I think ultimately what this comes down to, Alex, you need those guys to perform. And if those guys start performing, a lot of this stuff that is the background, the backdrop of what happened last year is going to fade back into the backdrop once again this year.
I agree with you, but to what we just mentioned, that's the difference between a good leader and a non-leader. Sure. When you're in a bad spot, when you are performing poorly and there are other guys around you that are performing poorly, you don't want to be bothered. Whereas the right leadership, they're going to take all of that in and say, look, even if I'm playing like crap, we still need to figure this one out as a group. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's good to identify that. Like Nolan Arenado said, if you have to say the phrase, I think I'm a good leader, like, you're probably not. But it's not the end of the world. If you're a lead by example guy, then that's exactly what you want. But my concern would be that you've got too many guys in that clubhouse that when things are going poorly, you go into a shell and you don't want to be bothered, which is what last season was. You've got to have more guys available to you that when things are going poorly, you don't turn into this isolation island where you say, no, I don't want to be bothered. I need to figure my own stuff out before we figure your stuff out, because then that leaks into everybody else. But guess what? That's what a losing culture is like. When you start winning, when you have winning cultures, when you have winning players around you, you find your way to dig yourself out of that.
Yeah, I think that comment, at least to me, says, like, okay, look, it's not the end of the world that Nolan Arenado's not a leader, because I think that's true. Miles Mikolas the same way. Like, when things are going rough for them wanting to not really have to take on that leadership role tells me, okay, well, they're just not leaders. Because like Alex said, a good leader, even in their struggles, will still try and lead by example. Even though Arenado was struggling last year, and we could all see it defensively, offensively wasn't the same guy, you still look at him as the whatever. He is a 10-time Gold Glover and a guy that could be an MVP caliber player, and you still want to get knowledge from that.
Between leading by example and leading by being vocal. And I think last year's team needed somebody to be vocal. I think everybody in that locker room, and we've all been in situations like this, I would assume, everybody in the locker room was waiting for somebody else to say something. It was like, and maybe it's in your relationship, right? Like, you can be a leader in your own relationship, whatever, but you're waiting and you're looking around and you're like, are we going to address this? We going to address this? We going to address this? And then eventually it just never really gets addressed, and it just becomes this elephant that's in the room at all times. And it feels like that's what last year's Cardinals team was. Or it's just like everybody had a problem with somebody else with the way that they were approaching something, but nobody actually said anything to anybody. So it was just this tension that was always in the room. And there's nothing anybody else can say. Like, for people on the text line that are saying, yeah, this is an Ollie Marmol issue. No, this is something that has to be addressed between teammates.
Yeah.
And if Nolan Arenado's not going to say it, if Paul Goldschmidt's not going to say it, I think this is part of why we heard everything about Brendan Donovan this offseason, becoming the leader of the team. I think Donovan said, you know what? Screw this. I don't care that I don't have 10 years of tenure on this team. Yeah, if nobody else is going to become the vocal leader, I'll go ahead and do it, because somebody's got to step up.
But see, the problem with that is, and this goes back to the mentality thing, if you're one of these guys that's been around the league for a long time and you have this isolation mindset where when things go poorly, you don't want to be bothered, what you really don't want is somebody who's been in the league for 2 years standing up and starting talking about everybody else.
But what if that guy has earned it? And I think Brendan Donovan at this point has earned
We think that, but do they think that?
I think so.
And that's where I'm concerned. Like, I truly believe you need somebody in that locker room that when things go poorly is not afraid to stand up. Maybe
I think it's Donovan. I really
I think they're thinking it's Matt Carpenter, and I don't believe that's going to have any impact.
I think Matt Carpenter's role is to be here and to help the young guys along. Like, I think he was here to be the shepherd. That's like... He's the older duckling that has
Just
the
say
ducklings
ugly duckling.
No,
Just say the ugly duckling.
I don't believe that. He's the older duck that has the ducks that are following him. You know, when you go to the park and you see them all going in one little line down the pond, that Matt Carpenter's the one at the front of that for all of the ducks. Because they need somebody to just show them the ropes, right? Apparently, according to Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. They need that. And those guys don't want to be the ones that have to do it every day. They just want to be able to focus on them. There's a conversation to be had about whether or not that's a healthy thing for your best players on your team to have that kind of a mentality. Like, I remember watching Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron on the Blues. That certainly was not their approach to it. I remember watching Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols. Wasn't exactly their approach to it, but neither here nor there. I think what the Cardinals have right now is a guy in Matt Carpenter who can just, hey, can you take this stuff on for us? Yeah. Cool. In their rotation, I think Sonny Gray is more than happy to take on this role of being the leader of the staff. And I think they desperately needed that. I think if you need somebody to say something, Lance Lynn is unafraid to be the guy that needs to say the thing that is said in the locker room. So they've got that on the position player side now with Brendan Donovan. He has emerged. They've got that on the pitcher side of things with Lance Lynn. He has emerged out there. Hopefully that's enough. And then it just comes down to, man, are you good or not? And that's really what this season's going to be about. Do you have the talent? Because I think the Cardinals are pretty good, not great. And if they play to being bad, that means that it was something worse than what we were anticipating.
It feels like being in a relationship to where when they're in a good mood, it's always good. But when they get into a bad mood, everything turns into chaos for a couple of weeks. And I don't know if that's a good thing for a baseball team that you can't allow a stretch of 2 to 3 weeks if things go poorly.
See, to me, we always have the conversation of, does winning create a good clubhouse culture? Does a good clubhouse culture lead to winning? What came first, the chicken or the egg? To me, these comments tell me winning is what determines their clubhouse culture. And I don't think if they had a Matt Carpenter in that locker room last year to step up.
Individual performance is impactful into the
Yeah, but I think
culture.
that's important of every sport. I think that what all these comments to me said was, what matters most? Were they good last year? Were they talent? Was Nolan Arenado? The answer was no. And you know what? The Cardinals sucked because of it. Let's be honest, they didn't have pitching. Arenado and Goldie weren't themselves. What happens? It all leaks into the locker room, and then it is the relationship where you're frustrated.
I might be making a mountain out of a molehill here. I mean, I absolutely might be, but it just. I appreciate Nolan Arenado being upfront and honest about it, saying, look, I might not be a good leader. I'm a lead by example guy. I just think you've got a ton of guys that are lead by example. Now, maybe Sonny Gray makes a massive difference. Maybe a Wilson Contreras, because Jack Flaherty's not dragging his name through the mud this season, can make a difference. Maybe Brendan Donovan can. It just feels like that if your best players go through a slump, that everybody is going to take on their persona in that clubhouse.
Maybe. I think... the hope this year is that you have other alternatives. Yeah. I think what happened last year is exactly what you're talking about, Alex. I think Goldie basically checked out. And I think Arenado was so mad that became the vibe of the clubhouse. It's just everybody was mad at each other. And I think the pitching broke, to your point, T-Bone. And then what you have is you have a manager that's trying to play kind of mediator within the clubhouse. And he's like, man, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is not, and it didn't matter if it was TLR, if it was Mike Matheny, if it was Ollie Marmol, or if it was somebody else like Bruce Bochy. Sometimes you just got a clubhouse that doesn't work. And last year, their clubhouse didn't work. And they were all pointing at one another, waiting for something to change, and it never changed. And the season finally came to an end, and you got all the comments afterwards. And this is something that immediately came out. Ollie Marmol said the first day that he was available, hey, we've got to weed some of these guys out. So clearly it was an issue, not just to Nolan Arenado, but to the manager as well. They knew, they recognized immediately, this is something that has to change for next year. And the hope is that's changed. We'll see. I think they might have gone too far in that direction where they exclusively targeted guys that can help in this regard. I think they need a little bit more talent, and that should have been the primary focus. But if they needed leadership, they added some of that this offseason. So hopefully that ends up being something that helps them. Coming up in about 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. Jeremy Rutherford is next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, the HVAC system that has been making people comfortable since 1926. And as we approach springtime, we're approaching warmer weather. I know that's crazy to say after we had, snowpocalypse on Friday. But when we get to that, you're going to have to flip on the air conditioning unit. And if you're like me, you got a 27-year-old unit, you're thinking, oh boy, what's this going to look like? I'm not as nervous about it because I use Classic Air Care. They have found ways to make my 27-year-old unit last for the last 6 years. I keep thinking I'm going to have to buy a new HVAC system, but instead, I'm on the maintenance program with Classic Air Care, which means they come out every 6 months before I flip on the heat, before I flip on the air. They clean the unit. They check the unit. They tell me it's old, but they say as long as you take care of it, it's going to take care of you and your family. So get with the people that care about you, that aren't just using you for the money. Classic Air Care are the people that care about you and your family. So give them a call today, Classic Air Care, or check them out on classicaircare.com and find out why the Ferrario family has been using Classic Air Care for the last 30 years.
Karen Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Yesterday, the Blues fell to the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-2. They'll be back in action on Thursday when they take on the New York Islanders. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Gerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Jeremy Rutherford. He's the Blues insider for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter, as always, at JP Rutherford, and we certainly appreciate him taking the time to join us today, coming off of a back-to-back losses for the St. Louis Blues. JR, let's start with this. What did you see in the last two games that was different from what you saw from the Blues when they won 8 out of 10?
Well, I think it's a couple things, and, you can focus on the last couple games, but I just think it's more big picture. I think anytime you win 8 out of 10, you're going to take that for sure, and that's not going to happen, the rest of the season. At least it's not going to, you're not going to win 8 out of every 10, obviously. But I think that if you look at the big picture, this team has a couple things. It's tough to score 5-on-5 for this team, and I think we know the reason. The roster isn't what it was, and the margin for error is very small. And so when you're not scoring 5-on-5 and you're making egregious mistakes, i.e. turnovers that we've seen from some key players on this team, then I think you're going to get the result that they got the last couple games. The other underlying thing is what kind of response, what kind of effort are you going to get in games that matter the most? And they all matter, don't get me wrong. But when you drop the puck for that game against Nashville, there should be no talk at the end of that game about not being connected and not playing the way you needed to play. That just can't happen the rest of the way if this team wants to secure one of those wild card spots.
JR, what should the concern level be for Blues fans after Drew Bannister basically said yesterday that Kevin Hayes, Brandon Saad, and Sammy Blais was the team's fourth line against the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah, and I think, we've seen that with Drew. He's been able to hold guys accountable. It started off with Buchnevich. We've seen it with Kyrou, and now we've seen it with a couple of these players. He's got nothing to lose, Alex, and we know that. This is Drew Bannister trying to press the right buttons and show that he can hold guys accountable. That's the number one word that Doug Armstrong said when he brought him in to be the interim coach. Is this what he wanted to do? So, we can sit here and have two different conversations, one about the roster and the players that we're talking about that he demoted. Are they great players? Are they top 6, top 9 players who can be consistent and help this team on a regular basis? I don't necessarily think so, but this is what Drew Bannister has to work with. And so in the meantime, he's going to have to move these guys up and down the lineup and try to get the most out of each one of them.
JR, I was disappointed by the performance out of Jordan Kyrou on Saturday specifically. I've been probably a resident defender of Jordan Kyrou. I look at the production, and despite some of the shortfalls with what he does defensively, I tend to think he's a young player. This is going to get better. He's going to become a more responsible player. And then games like Saturday take place where it just, the intent didn't seem to be there. What have you seen from Jordan Kyrou this season, and how would you assess his, I would say, his production relative to what you're watching night to night?
Yeah, I think we've seen basically what we've seen from Jordan the past couple years. And I think this is why his name is always in the headlines of people wondering why he can't produce more and show more of an effort. Has it been a different type of game for him this year? I think so, in terms of, they really wanted him to focus on the other parts of the game besides offense. And I think at times, I don't want to sit here and try to say that he's been just leaps and bounds better defensively, because, at times you see it, at times you don't. But I think it's kind of been more of the same with Jordan Kyrou. Here's my question when it comes to him. I think hockey players, sometimes they feel like there's somebody out to get them, whether it's a coach or it's just not a good fit with the coach. Well, if that's the case with a Craig Berube, let's say, and a change is made, and you're still a guy who's getting singled out in terms of moving down the lineup and not getting the ice time and getting some criticism, at some point it becomes more about you, and you have to have an awareness to see that. And so, I just feel like Jordan Kyrou moving forward, he's going to have to put more of an onus on himself to say, hey, look, I might have thought that, these are the reasons why I'm not producing and I'm not more consistent. It's all going to come down to me in the end, and I need to take whatever steps I can to be that type of player, because 9 and 10 and 15 and 20 people who talk about my situation and the way I produce, they can't all be wrong. So it's on me, and I think that's where Jordan Kyrou is going to come to a crossroads in his career in terms of what kind of player he wants to be.
JR, I am curious because, I think you're right, and this is the first time that I've really had the interest in having the conversation about what his future looks like here in St. Louis and whether or not we are at a crossroads coming up, either at this deadline or going into the offseason. You were here to cover David Perron at the beginning of his career, and you saw what that player was versus the player that we saw the second time that he came back to St. Louis, and certainly the third time as well. Do you think David Perron needed that change of scenery to become the player that he ultimately was? Was that almost a requirement for him, or do you think he would have got it if he had stayed?
I think he still would have been that player, because what I saw in David Perron, and we can talk all about the white skates and, not cashing his check, which, oh, by the way, he debates. He said it's because I didn't have a Social Security card. It wasn't because I didn't know I had to cash them. But I think we saw a guy that just matured really over those first few years. And maybe that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have the Keith Kachucks and those guys. I mean, how cool is it when you see David Perron thanking guys like Big Walt and other Blues veterans who are on that team for kind of molding him? But here's the thing with David Perron. He accepted those lessons, and he wanted to change, and he wanted to get better. And eventually he saw those flaws, and I think it benefited him tremendously. And so I don't think, going to Edmonton in the trade, playing with a few other teams, it might have made him more appreciative for what he had here in St. Louis. But I think David Perron was going to get it. And I just think that people look at Jordan Kyrou and wonder if that's going to soak in.
So Jay, this might seem like an odd question, but after watching these last couple of games and seeing the other team's top line outperform the Blues top line, do you believe that the Blues have a top line right now on their current roster?
Well, they don't have a top line that's playing well, and we've seen that top line, just light it up some nights, probably more so last year, and that's why Craig Berube came back with that line at the start of this season with Buchnevich and Kyrou and Thomas. You want Kyrou and Thomas to click, and Buchnevich has been a really good player the past couple years. It's just that, this year the only guy moving the needle is Robert Thomas, and, when you don't have your top line going, it's tough to compete with those teams for sure, especially when the Blues don't have the depth of scoring. I mean, you got Kasperi Kapanen playing on a second line has he hit 20 points yet? And you talked about Saad and Hayes being demoted to the fourth line. So, you got to have something. You got to have a top line that can score. You got to have maybe some depth scoring, one or the other. If you got both, you're going to be a good playoff team. The Blues have neither right now.
Jeremy Rutherford is our guest. You can find his great work over at The Athletic and follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. JR, you tweeted out your article earlier today that you have up on The Athletic right now. It's about Jake Neighbors, who was kind enough to join us in our studio out at the Centene Community Ice Center on Friday. If anybody missed that conversation with him, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
But you had a really good conversation with him as well about how the fan base here in St. Louis has really taken to him. JR, what was his response? What was his overall interaction like with you as you kind of got to know him a little bit more about in how he has embraced this fan base and how they've embraced him?
Yeah, I can just see it. And, that's the cool part in my job is whenever you're out, you're talking to people about the Blues a lot. And I'll tell you one thing. I had a friend who wanted me to try to help him get his hands on a Sundqvist jersey. And he's still a huge Sundqvist fan, right? A lot of people are here in St. Louis. But the other day I get a text from him, hey, you know what? As much as I love Sonny, I'd love to wear his jersey. Let me switch. I want to get my hands on a Neighbors jersey. And I think that's what's kind of happening here in St. Louis is everybody's becoming a Jake Neighbors fan. And listen, I grew up in St. Louis. I've lived here my entire life, 48 years. I've lived in a 20-mile radius. I grew up watching, the 1980s Blues, so on and so forth. And I can tell you one thing. When somebody says, how do Blues players become fan favorites? It's work hard. And it doesn't matter if you score 10 goals, 20 goals, 30 goals. It's you work hard. At the end of the night, these people who pay the money want to see that you put in an effort like they did during their day job earlier in the day before they came to watch you. And Jake Neighbors does that. And this article, what I tried to do is just show some smaller points of his game that shows how hard he's working. And let me use one little detail in particular. There's a play where Jake Neighbors is net front, and that's what he's supposed to do on this play. And the puck gets kicked out to the wall, and now Torrey Krug is on a one-on-one battle in the offensive zone, I should say. And Torrey Krug needs some help. What does Jake Neighbors do? He leaves the net front and skates 30 feet over to the wall to help Torrey Krug win that battle. And it winds up in a play where the Blues score. In fact, I think it was Neighbors who scored on the play. And so I'm sitting in Drew Bannister's office, and we're watching this clip. And I looked at Drew. I said, Drew, 300 players in the NHL don't skate over to the wall and help Torrey Krug. He said, if any. He said, even if that many. So, those are the types of players. People can see, that he's playing hard. But when you see those little nuances and the things he's doing, that's why he's becoming a fan favorite.
He's Jeremy Rutherford. You can find his great work over at The Athletic. That's where you can find his piece on Jake Neighbors. Some really good film work over there as well. You get a great breakdown from Drew Bannister on some of the things that we've seen lately from Jake Neighbors. Jerry, we appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy your time this week. We'll talk with you again next week.
Hey, you made it. No coughing. Good job there.
I'm doing my best. We'll find a way through. That's Jeremy Rutherford, one of the best in the business. Appreciate his time as always. Blues off over the next couple of days. Back in action on Thursday night against the New York Islanders. Coming up in 15 minutes. It was a big day yesterday for Mizzou fans. Not in a good way. It's been a rough start to the 2024 calendar year. Hopefully this thing gets turned around. We'll talk about their movement with their athletic director coming up in 15 minutes. But next, questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in there, and we will get to them coming up in just a moment. Let's start with this from the 314. Do you guys as a show regret that you spent roughly 50 hours this offseason talking about the starting pitching upgrades that we knew weren't going to happen? You could have spent a little more time talking about City and what they did to upgrade their roster in the offseason.
What number is that from?
Is Rockio texting us while he's in the office back there?
Bro, that definitely was a Rockio text if I've ever heard
I
one.
regret nothing, as the great Michael Scott once said.
Let me first of all say 50 hours is way less than what we spent talking about the Cardinals' potential
understatement
rotation upgrades. As for St. Louis City SC, man, I'm just going to be totally candid with you. I'm not familiar with most of the guys that they added, and most of our audience isn't familiar with most of the guys that they added this offseason. It seems like they did well in the transfer market. We talked about the Nico move. I'm still a little thrown off by it. I understand you've got two guys that you feel really good about. I loved the fact that this past year they had three of them, though, because you do have some serious health questions with João Klaus at the front end, and you're going to be expecting some big stuff from Big Sam this year if anything were to happen with João Klaus.
Who's Big Sam?
Sam
Adeniran.
Oh, that's right.
So
I knew that.
That makes me a little nervy going into the season. I'm not going to lie to you. But that's really like the big move of the guys that were on the roster a year ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, T-Bone. That we are familiar with that changed from last year to where we are this year. We did discuss that. Now, St. Louis City SC does begin their season tonight, kinda. They're a part of this CONCACAF Champions Cup. T-Bone, forgive me. This is like what the NBA is trying to do now, where they've got an in-season tournament that kind of matters, but really doesn't matter. Nobody really understands if it matters at all.
That one's actually worse, by the way.
Does this matter? Should I care about the game tonight? Are they going to play like their best players?
They'll play their best guys because this will. One, it's the first time they can actually throw out like an actual lineup into a game, and it's not preseason. I think they'll be trying in this one. This won't be like the U.S. Open Cup, that tournament that happens last year, where they play basically like their B team to just kind of develop those guys. I don't know, like CONCACAF, everybody will tell you it matters as Champions Cup. It's nowhere near. Like CONCACAF was hoping this would be like the UEFA Champions League, which is like Europe's Super Bowl. It's not that, but I think it somewhat matters to City because I think they want to prove like, hey, we can beat teams that are more international, kind of like I remember Champions Cup with Liga X, where we saw them get just pummeled by that Mexican squad earlier or last year. So I think they'll throw out the regulars. I'm going to watch it just because it's exciting to see the new team in action, but I wouldn't say it's like the end all be all. At least not from my perspective. I'm sorry, 618, that didn't enjoy all of the fun Cardinals pitching talk in the
I'll be watching tonight. Like, I'll be locked in. No Blues game. Got a St. Louis City SC game on. Cardinals are all talking about leadership. I would be more than happy to
who's not talking about leadership?
St. Louis City SC tomorrow.
City.
Yeah, because you know who will yell at them? Because I saw it a lot last year. The good old goalkeeper, Roman Berkey.
100%. They've got leadership. There's no question
In fact,
about that.
they're probably scared of Roman Berkey.
I mean, I'm scared of Roman Berkey, and I just see him on the television.
What's your level of excitement for this team?
I don't think it's where it was last year, but I would say it's still pretty high. Like if it was a scale of 10, last year was a 10 because it was the first time.
Sure.
I'd probably put myself at an 8 because they've got a lot of the same pieces as you mentioned. Like Klaus is still there, Berkey's still there, Parker's still there, and then they made some upgrades that again, like I couldn't tell you much about because they can basically go throughout the world to find talent for soccer. But I'm excited to see the encore of what City's going to be.
And it seems like they strengthened their weakness, at least from the second half of last year. So the fact that they're talking about and promoting that they've gotten more depth in terms of those guys that jump in and out of the games is an area that at least I'm excited to see if it's actually a strength.
Can I address one text real quick?
Oh, is it from this guy again?
Dude, don't let them get to you, man.
They're not getting to me.
You're going to start coughing.
This happens every time that we talk soccer, and it's so incredibly frustrating. Because this is, guys, if you're a soccer fan, this is the opposite of what you want to do. To continue to build your
make
sport.
BK angry.
Yeah,
No,
don't make him
it's
angry.
not about me. It's not about. Seems to me it should be your job to know about St. Louis City SC. The fact that you don't means that you don't do your homework for the show. I think I'll find somewhere else to listen to.
I got in this business because I didn't want homework.
It is our job to learn about St. Louis City SC. And that's what happens when we watch the games tonight. Listen, guys, a lot of the players that are transferring are international. And they're coming from leagues that we have no idea whether or not what they do there will translate to what they're doing for St. Louis City SC. Like, the equivalent would be the Cardinals going out into the Dominican League and finding a guy that could maybe help them this year. I'm not going to break down what that guy's going to be for the Cardinals. I have no idea, man. Like, we don't spend a lot of time talking about Riley O'Brien. Riley O'Brien could be a super interesting player for the Cardinals bullpen this year. He might be really helpful. Throws 98 with a crazy slider. But he's never really done it in the big leagues. So we're going to spend our time talking about the players that you have seen, that I have seen, that Alex has seen. And I'm talking about you, the listeners. Many of you have also never seen most of the guys that are on their team. So if I just start telling you about somebody, it's in one ear and out the other. When we see them on the field tonight, man, I can't wait to break this thing down tomorrow. That'll be worth your time because you will have seen what it looks like on the field. But for something like this, yes, it is absolutely our job to do the homework. And we have. We've seen what St. Louis City has done during the offseason, and we're looking forward to watching them play once again this year. But there is a limit in terms of the way that we can break them down. We can break down baseball offseason in a way that we can't with hockey offseason because there are fewer players that are known as nationally, especially here in St. Louis, as there are in Major League Baseball. The same thing is true in the NFL, right? We can break down the quarterbacks in a way that we're not going to break down offensive line play. Why? Because it doesn't appeal to as many people. There aren't as many names that are known nationwide when we break down the offensive linemen that could be changing teams going into this offseason. So that is where I'm coming from on my personal, I can't speak for the two of you, but my personal philosophy on our conversations with St. Louis City SC. They are a part of the show, but we have to be honest about where they are at going, like especially with off-season talk. During the season, it'll be different.
Just because you do homework on it doesn't make you an expert on it. And to do your homework and learn about it and learn about the roster and learn about what the expectations are. Like, look, I think Matthew Rocchio knows a lot more about soccer than I do, and I expect Rocchio to be able to break things down differently than me. But just because you're doing homework doesn't mean that you're not or because you're not coming on the air and acting as an expert because you're not doing the homework doesn't mean you're not doing your job. We're watching it. We're keeping track of everything that's going on. I would say that BK and I are both very honest about not being the most expert and up-to-date when it comes to the soccer coverage compared to other sports.
BK, that sounds a little contradictory. You guys spent a lot of time talking about the Asian pitchers that we have no idea how they would translate to Major League Baseball. You're talking about how you wanted them to be on the Cardinals. That would be like if the Cardinals were going to sign, or the St. Louis City SC was going to sign Messi or Ronaldo. Like, the dude got a bigger contract than any pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball. Come on, guys. We can be honest here.
Someone texted and said, sounds like you guys just don't care to try.
Okay.
That's it.
I got a cold. I don't want to do it. Coming up next, we're going to talk about
Now we're
Mizzou,
going to
because
break. I was
that's
gonna
something
rip
I
the
want to talk
Band-Aid
about
off.
here on 101 ESPN. All right, so it was a bad day for Mizzou. T-Bone sent the text bright and early yesterday.
A great day.
Desiree Reed-Francois is leaving Mizzou and going to Arizona. Yeah, the same Arizona that finds itself in $177 million of debt right now. Let me read from The Athletic.
That sounds like a great job.
Quote, athletic director Dave Hickey found himself out of a job just days after hiring Fish's replacement. The university president at Arizona is under fire as well from faculty and city officials as Arizona tries to navigate its way out of a nearly $200 million financial crisis that might compromise its abilities to compete. Everything is currently on the table with athletics, including layoffs, compensation freezes, and the elimination of sports entirely, although the latter does seem unlikely. Robbins initially told the Board of Regents that the university had $240 million in, quote, miscalculations. Since then, after a closer evaluation, an operation deficit of just $177 million has been revealed. Of Arizona's 81 college and divisions, 61, including athletics, are currently facing a budget deficit.
That sounds like a great job.
Sounds like
So
worth
that is
leaving
the
Mizzou
job
for.
that Desiree Reed-Francois left Missouri for and took a pay cut to leave for.
Good, they could
All right,
afford
Job
more.
security.
So that's the backdrop to all of this. And you may be sitting there wondering to yourself, well, why would she do that? That's the correct question to ask. And the answer depends on who you ask. If you ask Desiree Reed-Francois, the answer might be something along the lines of, well, did you see the oversight committee that the university curators just put together a couple of weeks ago? And if you haven't seen this, let me explain it to you. There are essentially 4 people that are in, quote, oversight committee that will see over everything that Desiree Reed-Francois was previously allowed to do. So if she spends money, they're going to double check all of her work. If she's hiring a coach, they're going to double check her work. They are going to be the people that are making sure she's doing the work properly. That sure sounds like they are neutering everything that she is capable of doing as the athletic director at the University of Missouri. I might add, she has added more funds and more revenue and more fundraising than any athletic director in the history of the university. Okay, so that might be one of the reasons why Desiree Reed-Francois would potentially leave the University of Missouri. Another might be the football coach, who is probably the most powerful person in the state right now and is the highest paid public person in the state right now. He was not her hire. He was essentially hired by the Missouri Board of Curators. And if you're Eli Drinkwitz and you're reporting essentially to the Board of Curators and not necessarily to your athletic director, and maybe you don't have the greatest relationship with your athletic director, what's the point of having that athletic director? Don't you want somebody else in place that's maybe a little more copacetic with you? So between all of these different things, and there are many, many more, I'm sure that is just scratching the surface. It's kind of like the whole situation that took place with Mike Schultz, where there's probably a million different stories as to what led to him being dismissed. There's probably a million different explanations as to why Desiree Reed-Francois is no longer the athletic director at the University of Missouri. That's all the background. Here's my opinion on it. I think this is a bad day for the University of Missouri. I think Desiree Reed-Francois was genuinely good at her job. She brought an athletic department that was stuck in the Stone Ages to modern college athletics. They are now operating the way that other teams, other universities, other programs across the country that are leading the way, that is how Missouri is operating now. They are at the forefront of NIL. They have a football coach that clearly is the right guy for this job. She hired Dennis Gates, who there are some questions about right now, but at the time that she hired him, there were a lot of questions about the hire. He came in, and in year one, you could not have asked anything more from him. The game day experience, if you have gone to a Mizzou football or basketball game recently, has improved tenfold since the day that she took over. The facilities have improved significantly since she took over. She has done an objectively good job from my perspective as the athletic director at Mizzou. So I think they have made a mistake here. I don't think it's a good thing at all that Desiree Reed-Francois will no longer be the athletic director at Mizzou, but I do think There's a lot of stuff that led to this, and in part, it's the athletic director getting neutered by the board of curators who just cannot help themselves. And I think in part, it's, hey, the football coach is the most powerful man at that university right now, man.
I thought Ben Frederickson did an outstanding piece this morning in the Post-Dispatch, kind of just generally talking about this whole scenario. And the line that caught me was that if you think this was just a matter of going back to Arizona, you're fooling yourself. Because he talked about how the place she was at and how successful she had been in a short amount of time leads somebody to want to stay and build. I thought this was pretty simple when I saw it. It's power hungry. I think you got somebody who is an AD who is not responsible for the individuals that are running the successful athletic programs at the university. And the successful athletic programs that are being led by coaches see this as, well, you didn't hire me. It's well, you're not my boss. I don't have to answer to you. And when power-hungry individuals turn into that, and then you have an opportunity to go somewhere where it's a program in disarray right now, like it is bad. You get to go there and you look at it as, wow, I can go and fix that. I get to go and be the one in charge rather than continue to fight for the leadership where I should be viewed as a leader.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that, I agree with BK because from the outside perspective, it looked like she was doing a very good job. And I think when you look at this from the Missouri's perspective, it's not like this is just a one-off. This has happened before as well. Think to the last AD that left for Baylor while it was in disarray, by the way, with its football program with what was going on with Art Briles. So not only does it look bad just from the first glance of when you see that news of, okay, she's leaving basically what is now just a Power 2 conference, SEC Big 10, to go down to the Big 12 and take on an Arizona program that's in disarray. That it's happened twice in recent memory is a terrible look for the University of Missouri, and it just makes you wonder, okay, well, how appealing is this job going to really be? Because the board of curators creating problems, if it's Drinkwitz creating problems, it doesn't equal necessarily this nice rosy job to where you look at it and go, man, that looks like an awesome spot to be at.
Yeah, so to your point, Mack Rhoades left for Baylor, a school that at the time was mired in controversy a month after Art Briles was suspended with the intent to fire him. And if you aren't familiar with the Art Briles controversy, go look it up, kids. Desiree Reed-Francois leaves for Arizona, a school that was arriving in the Big 12 with a $177 million budget shortfall. Those are the last two Missouri athletic directors that left on their own volition. It's not what you want, man. And there's a lot more that went into the Mack Rhoades thing. Like, that was coming off of the 2015 season where you had the racial protest on campus for Missouri. It was a really bad time at Mizzou for a million different reasons. Mack Rhoades got caught up in it all, and he was looking for the first landing spot. And he decided that Baylor was better than the University of Missouri at the time. So that's why he left. Desiree Reed-Francois, obviously, there's a lot of context that goes into why she left Missouri for Arizona. And for anybody that's saying, oh, well, she just wanted to go live in Arizona. No.
You're fooling yourself.
I promise you, this was not a situation where she left because she wanted the Arizona job. She was offered USC last fall. The University of Southern California offered her their job, and she said no. So think about that. Something has changed in the last 5 months that went from her declining the opportunity to take the job at USC to accepting that same role with less money at a less prestigious university in a less prestigious conference that is going through horrible, horrible money situations at Arizona. This is not a situation you want to be in if you're Desiree Reed-Francois. So whether she was pushed towards this or she saw the writing on the wall, and I call this the Frank Kaif, got out while you still could, while your name was still one of the top candidates out there, good for her for finding a decent landing spot, all things considered, where she can still be a sitting AD in a Power 5 conference. And she did go to law school there, so there is a tie between her and the university. But, man, I'll be very curious to see where Missouri turns to next. My guess, there will be some kind of a connection to Eli Drinkwitz, either in terms of him having a good relationship with this individual. No, not necessarily that, but him having a good relationship with that person, or them coming in with the understanding that these are the two most important people within the athletic department. It's you, and you got to make it work with Eli Drinkwitz, because that is the man that is buttering everybody's bread right now. He's bringing in all of the money. The football program is king at the University of Missouri right now. There is no more question, is this a football or basketball school? It's a football school. And Drinkwitz is the guy that makes everything work while you are at the University of Missouri. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, Are we officially reaching a crossroads in the conversation for the Blues with Buchnevich and Kyrou? We'll get into that coming up here in just a little bit. In or out coming up next here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are in or out here on 101 ESPN. So T-Bone brought up something during the break that I did want to talk about today. So I started the Dynasty, the new Apple TV documentary on the New England Patriots over the week. And first of all, the first 2 episodes were really good. I think they've done a really good job with this. Tom Brady comes off extraordinarily well, as you'd expect. The early portion of this is basically the making of what we now know to be the greatest quarterback in the history of the game.
Call me surprised that they're making Tom Brady look like a legend.
But it's not just on the field, it's off the field stuff. Like, he is incredibly likable early on in this. We'll see where things go. They've only put out 2 episodes so far. I think it's like 8 episodes in total. So we'll see how it ends, because we all know what the end was, and that didn't go particularly well for the Patriots.
They'll make Belichick look like the villain.
Belichick seems boring.
What I wanted to get to with this, in or out, guys, Tom Brady finishes this upcoming season as the clear-cut, no doubt about it, best NFL in-game analyst that we have.
Oh,
I'm gonna say I'm in on this. A lot of the analysts are insufferable these days when it comes to coverage. Like Romo's just awful. I found myself getting pissed at the television during the Super Bowl with Romo.
He was really bad in the Super Bowl.
I don't like Aikman. I actually thought Olsen was good, but obviously Brady's taking over that position. And as much as I love my boy CC, he ain't the same without Al Michaels with him. So I'll say in. I don't think there's anybody that can live up to those expectations. Now, give it 2 years. I wonder if Brady starts to fade into Tony Romo territory where I get pissed off at the sound of his voice. But at least for next season, he's going to be the go-to guy.
Nah, he won't do that. I didn't like Romo in year 1. I'll say I'm in on this. I think it'll be close, because I think him and Olsen will be close. Even though Olsen's on the second team, he'll still be really good. But I'll say I'm in. I wouldn't have said this before watching the documentary, though. I would have gone in and say, I don't know what to expect. But you're right. Watching this 2-part, or the first 2 episodes of this documentary, he seems really likable. And I can see where he can bring incredible football knowledge and also a little bit of a, what would you call it, persona to it a little bit.
Likability.
Yeah, likability. So I'll say I'm in on this.
I think I'm out because I'm so far in on Greg Olsen and what he brought to the table this past season. So I still think Greg Olsen will be number 1 for me. But, man, if Tom Brady actually wants to do it, and that's the biggest qualification, he's got to really want to be great at this. If he does, and he views this as, like, his primary job, man, he has a chance to be special. Like, all-time great at the broadcasting as well as he was with the football side of things. I've got my fingers crossed that we get that version of him, because the one that does all the podcasting stuff, like, you can tell it's just a throwaway gig. He doesn't say anything interesting. It's all canned answers. It's all the typical nonsense of what you'd get from an athlete that goes in there completely unprepared. And I'm not saying that, like, that's going to be what Brady is on the broadcast, but if it is, I'm going to be super disappointed. I hope that's not the case. I hope we get the better version of him. I've got my fingers crossed, but for right now, I'm gonna hedge my bets and say Olsen will still be number 1 for me.
I'd much rather an entire Sunday of the Manning cast. Give me a Manning cast of the Red Zone. That's what I want. I'll watch that every damn day of the week.
That actually would be fun.
I would watch that every day of the week.
The thing that makes the Manning cast so great, though, is that it's exclusive, right? You only get it on Monday night.
That's why
that's part of why you want it.
That's why they should make it more, though. I would spend an entire Sunday watching clips of the best plays and hearing those two talk about it.
That's fair.
In or out, boys, this discussion popped up after the Saturday game against the Nashville Predators where Jake Neighbors got a penalty shot. In or out, teams should be allowed to decline penalty shots and take a power play instead.
I'll say I'm in on that, because you'll see sometimes.
That's interesting.
And it didn't happen. I'm not saying this for Neighbors, but you'll see sometimes where, like, a fourth liner gets tripped up that like they get caught in a line change, and the next thing you know, like, no offense to Nathan Walker, but Nathan Walker's on a breakaway, they trip him.
Yeah.
Do you really want him taking a penalty shot? And then, like, if you miss, there's no power play afterwards?
That brings up the other discussion. Should you be allowed to pick who your penalty shot person is?
So I'd be okay with that. Like, I would either say if he misses the penalty shot, you still get the 2-minute power play, or you can choose to decline it. That's what I would do. So
that's a good one.
I'll say I'm in on this.
I'm in on this as well. I think that's a really interesting rule change and a fun one that would potentially promote more offense. And it gives teams a little bit more strategy as well, where you get to decide what is more advantageous for you. Is it better for you to go one-on-one, mano-a-mano with your guy versus their guy and see who comes out on top? Because I don't know what the percentages are. I would imagine that's probably better than 20%, which is about what you typically hit for really good power plays in the NHL. But there's also time that becomes a factor. If you're on the power play and you're able to essentially drain 2 minutes and you're up like 3-1 and it's late in the third period, that actually might be more valuable than taking that penalty shot. So I kind of like this. Yeah,
I would say I'm in on this one as well. Like, if I'm the Edmonton Oilers and anybody other than McDavid or Draisaitl get tripped up, I'm going to decline the the penalty shot. I'm like, no, I want the power play. I want my second best unit. But if you're the Blues and thinking of it in that circumstance, I would have declined the penalty shot. Jake Neighbors isn't known to be a penalty shot guy. I would much rather go with a power play that's clipping at like 28% in the last 2 months than go to a penalty shot that you don't get it. The momentum's back on Nashville's side. I saw the discussion pop up, and like if there's rule changes that the NHL should implement, that would be it, especially in a playoff game.
Yeah.
Imagine a playoff game 7 where you get a penalty shot and you say, no, I don't want it. I want the power play. It's like the 2-point conversion in football. Like, I would much rather give my team an opportunity to win the game with a power play than worry about a penalty shot.
And I also like the rule that they have in the PWHL, where if you score on the power play, you're still on the power play. Punish that team for going to the box.
That's the other one. Curbs has brought that one up before. Like, when you take a penalty, you should be in there for 2 minutes, no matter how long you're in there for.
So teams were at a 30% clip last year on the penalty shots. They were 15 for 50. This year they're actually even better. Teams have gone 15 for 35 this season on the penalty shots. So if we're just going purely by the percentages, if you need a goal, you're actually much better off by accepting the penalty shot as opposed to the power play.
But I wonder how many of those guys are like top players compared to, like Tebow mentioned, third or fourth liners that get a penalty shot.
I'll give you the list. Morgan Frost, Jake Wallman, Dadonov, Lawton, Konechny, Marchment, McDavid, Sprong, Schmaltz, Lowry, Pastrnak. Most of these guys are not
lower level guys,
not your typical like top line players.
That's why I like what T-Bone said. Like, I would do you get to pick your player. Like, you get the penalty shot, doesn't have to be that guy. You get to pick who you want.
See, I don't like that. I think that's too much. I would rather go the power play.
I think that's kind of fun.
I don't mind either way. But again, like, it doesn't happen that. I mean, you said 50 times. It happened last year, and that's not just.
That's a lot.
That's not a lot compared to when you think of how many games are played in the NHL. So I wouldn't mind either way. Guys, in or out, all 4 of the big free agents that remain in baseball, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Cody Bellinger, Matt Chapman, all 4 have to settle for pillow deals. In or out?
I'm out. I think somebody's going to. I think Jordan Montgomery, I could end up being wildly wrong on this still, obviously, but I think he's still going to end up with a 5-year deal. And I don't think it's going to be anything crazy, but I think some of the projections were like 5 and 100. That feels right to me. I'm kind of shocked he hasn't signed. And so that's making me waver a bit. I'm not surprised at all that people aren't willing to give Cody Bellinger the massive $200 million deal that he's looking for. The guy was 2 years ago essentially DFA'd by the LA Dodgers and said, hey, you're not good enough for us at that salary that you're going to command. Go get your money elsewhere. Took a 1-year deal with the Cubs, played really well for like 3/4 of the season, but he became a wildly different player. Like, he suddenly was no longer this hits the ball hard, crazy exit velo, power above all else. No, now he's like a contact-oriented guy who the baseline numbers that you look at the back of the baseball card looked good, but everything below that screamed, danger, danger, this is not sustainable, watch out, everybody, do not pay for this for the next however many years, this is going to wash away. So I'm not surprised at all that people are wavering on whether or not to give him the big contract. The guy that I thought would get one, though, is Jordan Montgomery. So I'm out. I think somebody will, and I think it's most likely going to be Jordan Montgomery. Chapman, Snell, and Bellinger, I think all of them had legitimate questions going into the offseason.
Yeah, I'm out on this one too. I think Montgomery, I actually think Bellinger's going to get, I don't think it's going to be a massive deal, but I think he's going to get more than like a 1-year deal. I think a Chicago Cubs team, once he comes back down to reality where he's not getting a 10-year deal, I think Chicago signs him to a 3 or 4 year deal and locks him up.
See, I'm actually in on this. I think all 4 are getting Pello deals.
Wow.
I think it's because I just don't know who's giving out a long-term deal at this point in the offseason.
If that happens, the Cardinals need to give one of Snell or Montgomery that Pillow deal.
100%. They won't do it, but 100%.
And Bellinger, good center fielder.
I think when you look at these guys, like I agree with what you said about the 3, Chapman, Bellinger, and Snell. I thought Boris was out of his mind for what he was asking for those 3. But I think the Snell market affects the Montgomery market, and I think baseball is telling Montgomery, dude, you're a number 3 starter. We're not going to pay you like a number 2 or a number 1. You're a 3/4, and we're not going to give you a huge contract. And I think right now he's just kind of stuck floating out there. And somebody, unless there's like a major injury that happens, which we know will, I just don't know where the spot is for a long-term deal for him.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. We'll get to a couple of these really quickly before we get to the Blues crossroads. From the 314, in or out, guys, Jordan Walker should be batting between Goldie and Arenado this season.
Out. I think he should be hitting second. I think you should have Nootbaar or Donovan leading off. I think Walker should be hitting second, and then I think it should go Goldie, Arenado, Contreras.
Oh, man. I'm going to say I'm out to start the year because I do like kind of what Ollie does where he likes to put a big left-handed power bat in between Goldie and Arenado. Now, if Walker ends up playing really well and has taken even more steps forward, I would hear the argument because he's going to be more consistent than what Gorman will be. So, but for right now, I would say I'm out on this.
I'm in on this because I think that's his future. And I would just go ahead and get it started now. I think he is eventually going to be batting second or third in your lineup. I think that's where he belongs. He's a middle of the order type of a bat. He's going to hit for average. He's going to hit for power. He's going to get on base. So I would put him right in that range. If you want to put him 2, fine. If you want to put him 3, fine. I would go Nootbaar 1, Goldie 2, Walker 3, Arenado 4, Contreras 5, and then put Gorman 6. So I would probably go with that. I know that puts a decent number of your lefty bats towards the bottom of your lineup, but I'm fine with it. You've just got so many good hitters. Just put them in the lineup and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah,
but
we'll see.
I want Jordan Walker getting more at bats. I don't want him batting 6th or 7th the way that he was a year ago. It doesn't get him enough opportunities, in my opinion. All right, coming up next, it feels like we might be reaching a crossroads for Buchnevich and Jordan Kyrou. If you can only keep one of those guys for the long haul, who would you be more likely to keep at this point? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about Tracy Bibb, her and her team at Allstate. I've been using Tracy for the last 5 years now, I think it is, when it comes to my insurance coverage. And there's a safety net knowing that Tracy and her team are taking care of me and my family when it comes to car and home insurance. I'll give you a great example of what you don't want. So my brother-in-law, he and his wife, their basement flooded. And when their basement flooded, they had to call their insurance company and figure out what they were going to do and how they were going to take care of it. They didn't call him back for 2 weeks. So they were waiting around with a flooded basement trying to figure out how they can get that taken care of. Don't be like that. Don't be waiting around. Tracy and her team are always available for you. They preach it's not a matter of if something happens, it's when something happens. And when it does, you call them up and they'll take care of you immediately. Give her a call today and tell her I sent you, Alex Ferrario sent you, and you can get a free non-committal quote. It's super simple. All you got to do, call her 314-328-4260, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues fell to the Maple Leafs yesterday 4-2, and they'll be back in action on Thursday when they take on the New York Islanders. We'll pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So are we reaching a crossroads right now with the Blues, and does it include a potential end point for one of Pavel Buchnevich or Jordan Kyrou? That's what we want to discuss here, Alex, because as I watch this team, I kind of had the same opinion as you did as we've been watching them in recent games. I don't think this team has a top line right now. You have a top player. Robert Thomas is a top-line player through and through. I don't think you could ask for anything more out of him so far this year. He has been, if not a superstar, at the level of a star in the NHL. He's a more than point per game producer on a team that has been mostly not very good this season. He's a plus 12 when he's on the ice. You only have a few other guys on your entire roster that are pluses. In fact, the only other players that are more than a plus 1 on the season are Nick Leddy, Colton Parayko, and Pavel Buchnevich. That speaks to the influence of Thomas because he's mostly been with Pavel Buchnevich this year. So, Alex, when I look at what the future of this team looks like, Thomas is going to be a top line player for you. I think you're going to have Snuggerud somewhere in your top 6. I think Jake Neighbors has established himself at this point as a top 6 player for you. Dvorsky, you hope, can be one of those guys for you. Are we at a point where you're going to have to choose between Buchnevich and Kyrou as being one of those other top forwards for you, even if it's not a top line guy, a top 6 forward for you?
I think you are. I think if you're Doug Armstrong, you're looking at this team right now, and it's not just this season, but I would say it's been the last 2 seasons, and you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, let's go down the path where I have to pay Pavel Buchnevich $8 million. Can my team win with those 3 guys making a combined $25 million for the next 8 years? And I got to be honest, watching this team perform over the last 2 months, I don't think you can win anything with that. And the Nashville Predators game, I think, is a perfect example for the Jordan Kyrou. You mentioned it earlier with JR, where you kind of, for the first time this season, got frustrated looking at it because he wasn't playing. If you look at the shift chart from that game, he slowly descended the lines. Drew Bannister dropped him to the second line, dropped him to the third line, and when you got to the third period, when you were trailing by 1 goal, then 2 goals, he was playing with Brandon Saad and Kevin Hayes. And by the end of the game, he wasn't on the ice. That tells you something. And the next game took place, and nothing from it. With Pavel Buchnevich, tinfoil theory, I wonder if that injury at the beginning of the season has just plagued him, but that's 2 straight years where an injury you look at and you say, man, is Buch the same player? When I look around the National Hockey League, specifically in the Western Conference, and you look at teams that you're competing with, and you know, Colorado's tough to do this with because they got a ton of dudes that are top 5 players. But if you look at Minnesota, if you look at the if you look at the LA Kings, if you look at the Winnipeg Jets, their top lines carry their team through a lot of scenarios. And if I look at the Blues and project forward, I don't know if that's a top line that can carry you into a playoff series and take you on a playoff run. I think you've got guys like Snuggerud and Neighbors who can become those top line players, but now we're talking about paying 1 or maybe 2 guys $8 million to be on your second line. So it sucks to have to say, but it does feel like you're at a position, if you're Doug Armstrong, where you look at both players and you say, who is more advantageous for this team's future trajectory? Is it a Pavel Buchnevich making close to $7 or $8 million, or is it Jordan Kyrou making that $8 million? And then from there, I think you can build your roster around. But it's pretty evident that 2 seasons, your team's been middling with those guys as your top line players.
Is it weird if I say, like, should we be presenting an option C as to, like, because we said, like, you know, Kyrou with $8 million or Buch with $8 million. Is there a scenario where it is neither with $8 million and you try and move forward without both? Because, like, if I have to choose, and honestly saying this right now, I don't feel comfortable choosing A or B, I would take Jordan Kyrou, but I'm pretty hesitant about it because I think he's just a harder player to, when you think of what his ceiling could be, a lot harder to replace than what Pavel Buchnevich is.
I think there's a lot of truth to that because he has the potential still, despite what we've seen this year, to be a 40-goal scorer. I mean, last year was real, and it's meaningful. And while the plus-minus was not something that you would boast about, his production as a goal scorer was something that was noteworthy, man, especially given his age at that point in time. And so it gave me hope. It gave me belief that he didn't need to be a great defensive player. Just, can you be passable? Can you get to the place where you're passable? And the thing that's frustrating to me is I don't even care about his defense at this point. It's not about that. A lot of the time it's about his offense now. And it's not that he is not producing. It's that sometimes he seems disinterested.
It's the compete that Doug Armstrong talked about.
A lack of engagement. Like, it's not winning puck battles on the wall because that's not something I expect people with Jordan Kyrou's skill set to do very often. But his passes just lack any sort of intent sometimes. And there will just be full games where he's just kind of skating out there. And we've all done this in our daily life, right? Where you go through a day, or this is something that none of us would like to admit, but it's true. Like, sometimes you drive from your house to work or from work to your home, and you're like, man, I remember nothing from that. Just completely zoned out. And thank God I ended up back at home, right? But you were just driving and you were zoning out the entire time that you were there. I feel like that sometimes is what Jordan Kyrou does when he's on the ice. He's just kind of skating. He's just gliding back and forth and gliding back and forth. And he's so damn talented, so skilled, that just by gliding through, he could probably get you 20 goals in a season, get you to 40 to 45 points in a season. And then when he turns it on, all right, now we got a 25 to 30 goal scorer with a 60 to 70 point producer. And that's kind of what he is this year, is he glides through a lot of the games, and then when he wants to turn it on, damn, does he look good. But if he doesn't get it now, with multiple different coaches trying to break through.
And he's going to be 25 next season.
With multiple different lines that he's tried to make it work on. Multiple different centers that have tried to get the best out of him. Multiple different spots on the power play that have tried to get the most out of him. I have officially come to the place, and I'm not an alarmist with Kyrou. I've been the guy that has been steady from start to finish here. I'm to the place now where I wonder, is this going to work here? He may go on. It may be something that you look back on and you say, God, we regret making that move because he's scoring 40 goals every year for somebody else. That is very possible when you make this kind of a move. I don't think the same thing is true with Buchnevich. But I don't know that you're going to be able to get the best out of him here in St. Louis. I just don't think that this is going to be the spot for him.
When you looked at that Nashville Predators game and when you watched the Toronto Maple Leafs game yesterday, did you at any point feel like your top line was going to take that game over?
No.
Because I didn't. And those are games that when I'm paying, and right now I'm paying two of the guys $8 million. If I'm paying three guys $8 million, I got to hope that they take over the game. I got to be honest with you guys, more times than not lately, I think the Braden Shen and Jake Neighbors line is going to take over a game, or Alexei Toropchenko and Oscar Sundqvist are going to take over a game. And that's a problem for this team. And one text that came in from the 618 says, I reckon the Blues can win with their top line making all of that money because it'll offset by Dvorsky, Snuggerud, and Neighbors on entry-level deals. Guys, Pavel Buchnevich is going to be making his raise the same time that Jake Neighbors is an RFA. And if you're like, well, Jake Neighbors can't get that much money, Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou both got paid after their RFA status $8 million. And if Jake Neighbors is going to continue...
Their first one, though, they got the bridge deal. They got the bridge deal, and then they got the big extension.
Okay.
But it was still,
but regardless,
$2.5-3 million.
Kyrou got the money last year when he was 24 years old. Thomas got it last year when he was 23. Jake Neighbors will be 23 when he's up as an RFA. And if Jake Neighbors continues at pace where he's 20, 25 goals and plays the way he does, he's not going to come in and say, yeah, I'll play for $3 million. Like, I know the cap's going up. I know that there's more money available to you. But if you're a Blues team that's trying to exit out of a retool, there's a couple of things you got to identify. We've identified the goaltending. You're in a good spot. You've identified a top defenseman, I believe, with Colton Parayko. You've identified a top centerman. But you got to identify a top line. And I can look at teams in the Western Conference all have top lines. And although you've been good defensively against other teams' top lines, some nights you need them to take over a game and win it for you. And I don't think they've done that enough for me to sit there and say, this retool's in a good position because I've got Thomas, Kyrou, and Buchnevich.
So I just went through for next year, every team that has at least three forwards, on the books that are making $8 million or more. There are only three of them. One of them is Toronto, and we know they're getting superstar production out of those players. The other two are Dallas and Colorado. So it's both inside of your own division. And again, they are getting superstar level of production out of their forwards that are making $8 million per year. That's the problem that I have with signing three of these guys to those $8 million per year contracts. Are you going to expect that out of them? Can you expect reasonably for Kyrou, Thomas, who I think you can, and Buchnevich on a year-in, year-out basis to produce like an $8+ million forward? That's kind of hard for me to believe.
And if you can't believe in that, you can rely on Jimmy Snuggerud and Dalibor Dvorsky all you want, but they're going to take a couple of years before they even get to the NHL. It's going to take a couple of years. And now you're talking about Buch being 32 years old, Kyrou being 27 years old, and you're talking about, okay, have they taken that next step to guide these next players into it? Like, it just feels like when I project 3 years from now of what this roster looks like, it feels like I'm hoping there are 2 spots on the top line that get filled. And if Robert Thomas is going to be a point-per-game player and play the way that he's been playing, as Doug Armstrong told us, at some point you have to find the players that complement him and help him win those awards, and I'm not sure you have that yet.
The players that are making as much as Jordan Kyrou, that are averaging fewer points per game this year than Jordan Kyrou. John Tavares, he's up there in age. Alex Ovechkin, obviously up there in age. Jeff Skinner, 32. Tomas Hertl, 30, and there's a lot going on there. Johnny Gaudreau, that's a horrible disaster of a contract already for Columbus. Jonathan Huberdeau, disaster of a contract. Jamie Benn, 34 years old. Timo Meier, that's gone kind of weird for him so far in New Jersey. Nobody could have seen that one coming. Patrick Laine, all of us saw that coming. Pierre-Luc Dubois, all of us saw this coming. And that's it. That's the list of players that are making what Jordan Kyrou does on the books for next year that are producing less than Jordan Kyrou has so far this season. It's disappointing, man. I thought it would be better than this. And the other thing is, like, some of the guys around him, like, for example, Brady Tkachuk, who's right around the same production so far this year as Jordan Kyrou, this gets into the element of, well, he brings something else to the table. He helps you in other areas of the game. And that's just never anything that I expected out of Jordan Kyrou, but the point production was supposed to mask that. You could live with the lack of physicality, the lack of defense, the lack of everything else, because, well, he's scoring goals, and that's ultimately what he's being paid to do. And this year, he's not doing it at the same rate.
Late in games, since Drew Bannister has taken over, when the Blues are up by a goal, it is Thomas, Buchnevich, and an Oscar Sundqvist stepping over the boards. It's a Thomas, Buchnevich, Kasperi Kapanen stepping over the boards. They're pulling Kyrou off of that top line, which should tell you a lot. For what you're going to be paying 3 guys in the most crucial moments, I need those players stepping over the boards. And if my coach doesn't have trust in those guys to be able to get it done, how can I, as a fan, look at that and say those guys are leading us out of this retool?
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues are off over the next couple of days, but they're back in action on Thursday night against the Islanders. City SC opens up its season tonight. Coming up next, the Jug Drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Let's dive into the junk drawer. T-Bone, what do you got for us today, my man?
Guys, did you see the story over the weekend about Noah, I think he's pronounced Chanel, of the LA Angels and what his workout routine was this offseason?
No.
So he's a first baseman.
Hold on, somebody from the Angels works out the offseason?
Yeah, it does happen.
Not Rendon.
Yeah, not Rendon. Rendon
Well, we
is
know that.
just showing up and playing ball.
He just wants baseball to shorten to 82 games so he doesn't have to work out as long.
He couldn't stay healthy through that, let's be honest. But anyways, Noah Chanel, who got a cup of tea with the Angels last year, played a couple games for them, tried to make the team out of camp. Probably could because they suck. But what his routine was this offseason, 2 days a week, he would stand from the moment he got up, and he would not sit until he went to bed.
Oh, I did see this, but I didn't realize who it was.
Yeah, 2 days a week. The only time he would sit, the only exception he had was when he was eating. That's the only exception he would have, is he would stand from the moment he got up in the morning until he went to bed at night. And he wouldn't, so he would still do workouts, by the way. He'd still do baseball activities, and he would still do leg day. And he would walk to the place he was going because no driving's allowed because you're sitting.
So this is something that when you're a parent, you kind of get a little bit of this.
I don't sit down until 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, a lot of what you do as a parent, you don't realize it at the time. You're basically training for a marathon. You're just standing on your feet at all times because the kid doesn't want to be down, so you're just holding him. So you're just walking, and then they want to sleep. So what do? You hold them, and you're walking, and then when they go to bed, they wake up in the middle of the night. So what do? You're walking, and you're holding them. So a lot of this is essentially him training for either a marathon or to be a parent. I feel like all of these are kind of one and the same. Training for baseball, training for a marathon, training for a parent.
Yeah.
I've done 2 of those 3.
So, now that you have 2 kids, it's not just you're standing all of the time, but you're bending down and you're picking up.
Sure.
So, my calves and thighs probably are the best part of my body these days because you're doing a lot of squats, you're doing a lot of picking up, you're doing a lot of putting down. We've got a bed that, reclines and inclines and things like that. Katie and I,
one of those hospital beds?
Yeah, kind of. Katie and I sleep with our legs up in the air because it's you got to get the blood circulation going back down to your body because you've been standing all day. So we'll fall asleep at 11 o'clock and we'll look up and be like, oh, bed's still up, straight up in the air. Our backs are going to be jacked by the time we're 30.
Coming up next,
30.
we have some breaking news for the St. Louis Blues. And this is actual real news. We'll get into it next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Brandon Kiley to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sportsbook Illinois. Alex, this is the time of the year where my college basketball viewing really starts to take another level because I'm trying to get ready for March. And with Circa Sportsbook in Illinois, you're going to be betting March the way that it should be. They're the largest sportsbook in Vegas, and now they are available to you in the state of Illinois. Maybe you want to put down your futures bet. Right now, there's not a lot of value on UConn. I think they are very clearly the best team in the country, though. If you want to get a little bit more of your bang for your buck, I would personally throw a dime or two out on Arizona. Alex, got to tell our friends about what everything else is that they can do over on the Circa Sportsbook.
Yeah, look, when it comes to Circa Sportsbook, you're doing it because you want to bring in the most money possible, and that's what I love about Circa. It's the time of year where BK's watching basketball. It's the time of year I lose a lot of money because of those big game parlays. But the best part about it is when you use Circa, they're making sure that you bring in the most money in return. And if you've got any issues, customer service is at its all-time best with Circa Sportsbook. You're always talking to somebody, not just bots. So check out the app, find out why BK and I only use Circa Sportsbook Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
So we have some big news for your St. Louis Blues. Over on the website, they have announced it. It is official. Justin Falk has been placed on long-term IR. Scott Perunovich has been placed on IR. And the Blues are recalling Zachary Bolduc to the NHL squad. So, Alex, let's get to the injured side of things first, because I think we're going to spend a decent amount of time on Zachary Bolduc. That's a big move for the Blues. I'm genuinely shocked that they decided to do this in season. But let's start with Justin Falk. The big news here, he's going to be placed on LTIR. I thought this would probably be the route that we would go. We don't have an update on him necessarily.
I don't think he's been skating.
What is it, 10 games that he has to miss officially?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it's retroactive to his injury.
Correct.
So
this doesn't change a whole lot in terms of his status, but what it does do is it gives them more flexibility to operate with if they need it or if they want it when we go into the trade deadline, because now his cap hit does not go against the cap sheet for the Blues for this season. So we'll see exactly when he's able to come back. It sure seemed like he was not close. On the Scott Perunovich front, Alex, this is just the latest in a long line of frustrating moments this season. It felt like there was finally starting to be some momentum for him early on in the year. And once again, it's the same story all over again, where it gets derailed because of injuries for Perunovich.
Yeah, and again, this one's retroactive, and he has been skating, so, maybe this is just more so letting him kind of take his time before you throw him back in there, because if he does come back, you don't want the injury to really impact him. The interesting part about Scott Perunovich is, first of all, if you're him, you really need to be on the ice, because the only way you're going to improve your stock, and I think he looked fine this season, it wasn't anything earth-shattering, but you started to see him get a little bit more comfortable. If you're him, you got to show that you can stay healthy, and this is now 3 straight seasons to where it's impacted him. Now, this one is a little different. This one was him blocking a shot that took him out of a little bit, but the other interesting part for this one, and if I'm not mistaken, he falls under the category of a Group 6 unrestricted free agent. Correct. To where if he's got to play a certain amount of games in the National Hockey League, that if he doesn't meet it, he becomes an unrestricted free agent rather than the Blues' property in terms of restricted free agency. So there's more nuances that go into it, but for Scott Perunovich, there's a certain amount of games that you got to meet if you want to be an RFA or if you want to be a UFA. So I don't think that goes into this. We're talking about a guy that more than likely is probably going to play at some point on this upcoming road trip because he has been skating, but a couple of things. One, I think it tells you where the Blues are at, but two, it tells you that they're not rushing these defensemen back because, if anything, they're pleased with how they've performed.
All right, so the other side of things is Zachary Bolduc. I'm pretty surprised they're calling him up, Alex. Now, I think they're in a place of desperation because, as we've seen and as we've been talking about today, you just don't really have middle six forwards that can produce at 5-on-5. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, your third line was serving as your fourth line in this past game, with Kevin Hayes and Brandon Saad essentially being demoted. And while the time on ice doesn't necessarily show it, they were on the ice essentially the same amount as what your typical fourth line does. Yeah. So they were used accordingly. In his last 16 games, he has seen a bit of an uptick in his production. He has 4 goals and 6 assists in his last 16 games. He is an even on ice. That doesn't tell really the whole story. There's a lot of work being done there by a couple of games where one, he was a -4, another, he was a +4. So the performance, I'm not going to be a fraud and tell you that I've been watching the AHL with Springfield and I've seen what he's been doing. But just based on the numbers, it feels like it's a lot of up and down and up and down. Yeah. What do you make of him getting the call up?
I'm surprised, too, because from everything we've heard, Doug Armstrong wanted to keep him in the minors as long as possible because you want him to figure out how to be a pro. You want him to figure out everything that goes into it. And you don't want to rush a young player up to the National Hockey League and force him in a position that might stunt his growth. Now, he has been playing much better as of late. I think over the last 2 to 3 weeks, he's been getting top-line minutes. He's been playing power play time, 5-on-5 up with the top line, and he's produced. He's got 23 points in 48 games. You know his shot is lethal. The biggest reason the Blues are at this point is what you just mentioned. I don't think they're happy having Kasperi Kapanen in your top 6. Your third line has been invisible, and your fourth line has been outplaying a lot of your lines.
I think they don't want Blais in the lineup anymore.
Yeah, that's what I absolutely think. And Alexandrov hasn't taken any of the opportunities in front of him. But, guys, go through the list of the rosters for the Thunderbirds. The Blues have exhausted all of their options. Adam Gaudette played, didn't do much. Matthew Pekka played last season, didn't do much. Nathan Walker is here. Hugh McGing was up here, didn't do much. You've tried Will Bitton. You haven't tried an Abramov, but he hasn't been doing much. You've tried a Mackenzie McEachran. You tried Jakub Vrana. The only other guys for you to try is Zach Dean or Zachary Bolduc. And Dean has not played to the level. And what do you need right now? You need offense. So this is a tough spot to be put in when you put a 20-year-old into the NHL. But I would imagine they're bringing him up here and they're saying, look, we don't need you to do anything to change the world. We need some offense. We need some offensive opportunities. You're going to be doing this for the next couple of years. You got to learn the ropes. And if I were a betting man, I would say that your entire roster, your entire lines, minus the fourth line, is going to be juggled up with Zachary Bolduc up here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Jake Neighbors play with a Robert Thomas. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Jordan Kyrou dip down to play with somebody else. And they'll probably put a Zachary Bolduc with a player like Braden Shen.
Somebody on the text line asked why I'm surprised that they brought up Zachary Bolduc, and it's because of what Alex mentioned. They really wanted him to get opportunities down in the minors to continue seasoning. And I haven't seen a lot of Zachary Bolduc. I'm curious, Alex, I know you've got a connection out there in Springfield.
Just texting with the play-by-play guy, Ryan Smith, and this is what he just texted back. He said, what's impressed me most about Zachary Bolduc is how much work and how much impact he's had in the 200-foot game. Still think he could shoot more, but it's such a weapon with his shot. He's been eons better in his own end, and the confidence has grown.
All right, maybe that's it. Maybe they're rewarding. They're saying, hey, we wanted to see this out of you. You've shown it to us. Now, here's an opportunity at the NHL level for you to go showcase what you've done down in the AHL. Now, let's set expectations reasonably for Zachary Bolduc. When he comes in, the expectation should probably be that he's just not a complete liability.
Yeah.
Nothing more. That's it. If he goes out there and is serviceable,
you don't want to notice him on the ice.
That's a win.
Yeah.
Given where this team is. Do you think he'll get power play opportunities right away, Alex?
Probably not, because I don't know who you're taking off your power play. Your second power play unit scored yesterday. I think he's solely going to see 5-on-5.
Where do you put him in your lineup?
I think what I would do, and this is just me
replace Blais?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want him playing with Kevin Hayes.
But do you want him getting the minutes that will be required if he's playing with Thomas or Shin? Because that's where it gets really tough, is like you're kind of trying to hide him.
Yeah.
But
I would juggle up my top 9. I think my line combination would be Buchnevich with Thomas and Neighbors. I would try and get some more offense for my top line. I would put a Bolduc with a Shen and a Brandon Saad, and I would put a Kyrou with Kevin Hayes and Kasperi Kapanen. And I know nobody's going to like that, and I'm probably the crazy one because how can you dip a Jordan Kyrou down? But, guys, you got to start spreading the wealth offensively. And if you're putting Bolduc in the position, and not saying that Kevin Hayes is bad defensively, but I just don't know if I want to plug and play a Zachary Bolduc with a Kevin Hayes and Brandon Saad.
Man,
Unless you stick with using them.
I'm fascinated to see what they do here because there's not an obvious construction as to how you go about. Like, I could say, hey, you just plop him in where Sammy Blais is, but you make a fair point, Alex. Do you want him playing with Kevin Hayes and Brandon Saad? I could make the case either way. It kind of reminds me a little bit of how they first used Robert Thomas on the wing when he came up, where it was like, hey, this guy's got speed, and you're putting him on a line with like more plodding players, but you do so to kind of take off some of that heavy lifting from what Robert Thomas had to do at the time. I'm not trying to compare them. They're different players. One is a future center. The other is an obvious winger. But maybe that I think that is probably what they end up doing. If I had to say, like, what do I think they'll do? I think it's that. I think they will just replace Sammy Blais in the lineup. They'll put Bolduc with Hayes and Saad, and they'll essentially use the third and fourth lines as interchangeable pieces. What I would do...
You got to get Kapanen off that top line. And look, I was hoping Kapanen would be better, but he's not providing you any offense in that top line with Shen and Neighbors. And if you're going to keep Thomas, Kyrou, and Buch together, I got to have a line that creates offense. Who's the shooter on Braden Shen and Jake Neighbors' line? You don't have one.
Yeah.
You don't have a shooter.
So that's one of the issues that I had with this team coming into the season is when you look at the right wingers, I just think you have one. Like you have one future top 9 right winger on your roster, and it's Jordan Kyrou. And he's probably best suited as a middle six forward as opposed to a top line forward. I'd like to see them go with Jake Neighbors, Thomas, and Buch on that top line. Shin, Saad, and I guess you could go. Man, it's just asking so much of him. But I guess in that scenario, you could go with Bolduc there.
So here's the other thing.
And then maybe like a Kapanen, Hayes, and Kyrou on the third line, but I don't think you're getting the most out of Kyrou there either. So it's tough. I don't think there's an easy combination that you can go with right now.
Been playing a lot of the left side with Springfield. Now, maybe you can move that around, but I would imagine you're doing that because that's a shooting side.
You're going to have to move Neighbors to that top line then.
Yeah.
Because he can play either side. He's shown an ability to play the right side.
And somebody's going to have to move to the right side, probably a Brandon Saad. You would probably...
Neighbors. Neighbors would be that guy.
Oh, Neighbors to move to the right side. Yeah, you're right. But then you're going Bolduc, Shen... See, that's the problem.
Or Neighbors. I mean, you could do Bolduc, Shin, and Neighbors, and you could just have two guys that are more physical on that line to take away some of that responsibility.
That's kind of what I mean, I would put Neighbors up on the top line.
They're going to put him with Hayes. We all know it. It's going to happen.
I think they're putting him on the fourth line.
I could see it. I'm actually not kidding. I could totally see them putting him on the fourth line and saying, Nathan Walker, congratulations, or Alexei Toropchenko, congratulations, you're going up.
See, I don't think they're going to break that fourth line up. I think that's why they're calling up Bolduc is because they don't want to keep breaking
they just
up.
Make it a de facto fourth line with Kevin Hayes. Like they did that in the last game. Maybe they're just saying, hey, you know what? Our third line is Toropchenko, Sundqvist, and Walker, and our fourth line now is Kevin Hayes, Brandon Saad, and
I mean, you look at the narrative. Kyrou went from one line to the other in that Nashville Predators game. Blais was in and out of the lineup. Kapanen hasn't really been producing in that top 6. They're searching for more offense in your top 6. So,
are you surprised they're doing it?
Yes and no. I'm surprised that it's gotten to this point because, like, they made it very clear they wanted to keep this kid in the minors as long as possible to not stun his development. But I also, and the part of me that's not surprised is I feel like they were forced into this. You have no other there's nothing else you can do. And if you're in a playoff race, you need some even strength offense.
And I also feel like, and I don't know if you guys feel this way or not, I feel like this is kind of their last-ditch effort to see if they can, A, find something from their minor league depth, and then, B, if it works, like if Bolduc comes up here, is scoring goals, and he's not like a major liability, they don't necessarily have to go out and go shopping at the deadline either. Because this is basically an addition at the deadline, but it's not a trade, and you don't have to give up any kind of asset.
Snuggerud will eventually be here, too.
Exactly. So I think that's part of the reason, too, is I think, A, you're rewarding him if what Ryan Smith says is true, and I believe him that, okay, he's playing with more confidence. Okay, let's reward him. Let's see how he does. And if he plays well, he's got, 3 weeks till the deadline?
Yeah.
All right, boom, there's your addition. And we don't have to go out and spend any kind of asset for a middle six forward.
Yeah, well, and I mean, they did this with Jake Neighbors, too. I mean, now they put him down in the minors because he wasn't performing and the team was stinking, but they brought him back from the minors because he was performing well. Like, you do have to reward these guys. And again, you just don't really have much else in your minor league system that can provide offense. The other part that I find really just a fun nugget with this one. So Thursday's game is against the New York Islanders. Patrick Waugh's the coach, and that was his coach in junior hockey.
Oh, that's cool.
So we'll at least get a good nugget from Patrick Waugh, hopefully, talking about what Zachary Bolduc brings to the team.
We're getting this on the text line, so I'm going to ask you, Alex. Any scenario in which this is them showcasing Bolduc prior to the deadline? Would that make sense?
I don't think so. I mean, you hope he comes up and he scores goals. Why would you trade that? If you were showcasing him, you'd keep him in the minors and let him continue to play well. I think he's got 4 goals in his last 8 games.
Yep.
Like, he's performing well. He's a top pick. I don't think you showcase a player and take the chance of him not looking good at the NHL level.
That's why I don't think it's that.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's more likely he gets exposed than that he comes up and shows out in a significant way at the big league level.
Nothing's going to change. He could come up here and score 5 goals in 4 games, and I don't think that's going to change the mindset of another team by March 8th. Teams that make those trades want players that can compete at the NHL level for a playoff run. If anything, you're showcasing them if you decide to move them in the offseason.
Makes the next game that much more interesting.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much. They've got my attention.
Absolutely.
With what they just decided to do here. This also shows some urgency.
They want to compete.
Let's not underestimate that. What they're showing by this is, hey, we need to get this fixed at the NHL level, and our last gasp at doing so is coming from the minor leagues, seeing if Bolduc can be that guy. So credit to Doug Armstrong. One of the things that I grew increasingly frustrated with by the Cardinals was just running it over. Just waiting for something to change, and it never did. They didn't churn through any of the roster early on in the season. It was like, guys, do you realize what is happening right now? And it seemed like the answer was no, and obviously the answer was no. They didn't understand the magnitude of what was taking place in the moment.
They fixed it this offseason.
Yeah, clearly. But one thing that I'll give Doug Armstrong a lot of credit for is he's churned through this roster, man.
Yeah.
For better or worse, he's trying to find out what does, what doesn't work, and let's see what it looks like whenever they're up.
You've exhausted every option to, at the end of the season, when you're looking at the players that you have and deciding if you're going to bring guys back or not, you have all of the evidence in the world to be like, this guy doesn't impact our team next year.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. Blues off the next couple of days, back in action on Thursday against the Islanders, hopefully with Zachary Bolduc in the lineup for the first time for the St. Louis Blues. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you. It is a sign that springtime is here because Ted Drew's off of Chippewa is officially open for its 95th season. 95 years, 4 generations of families have been creating memories and traditions from St. Louisans with that famous frozen custard. You know the spot off of Chippewa. You pull in, you wait in line, you get your Ted Drew's frozen custard, and you sit in the back of your car and just enjoy time with family and friends. Man, I can think back when I was younger, and my wife and I love doing that now. now with our daughters over at Ted Drew's. It's got the legendary status. You know, the high-quality frozen custard made with the finest ingredients. And here's the best part. You can get whatever flavor you want, whatever mix you want. My wife's favorite is the s'more. It's a concrete or a sundae you can get with s'mores, delicious blend of chocolate, marshmallow, and graham crackers. While you're out there, walk across the parking lot, check out the Ted Drew's gift shop where you can shop a unique variety of apparel, souvenirs, hats, drinkware, gift cards, everything you want that says Ted Drew's. Go check them out. Begin those family traditions for their 95th season at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Guys, let's start with the obvious, and that is the quarterback contracts that are going to start getting doled out over the next few weeks. The big one that's hitting free agency is Kirk Cousins. Now, the talk is, Vikings aren't going to be willing to guarantee his entire contract, boys.
Oh, here we go again.
Oh, great.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's going to change at some point over the next few months. But if you had to guess today, just you're taking your shot at the dark, where do you think Kirk Cousins ends up? Because he's going to be the top guy. He's the first domino that really has to fall out.
Well, I look at teams that believe they can win a Super Bowl with the roster that they have. They're just missing a quarterback. Atlanta's one that comes to mind. I think that one would make a lot of sense. If you're Detroit, do you consider it?
I mean, Goff.
I guess you can't get out of Jared Goff's contract either.
He was awesome
I think they're going to
year.
extend. Jared Goff's going to be making $50 million in a year.
Yeah, but if you had Goff or Kirk Cousins, wouldn't you go a little Kirk Cousins?
I think given the vibes right now, I would just stick with Goff, and I'm not kidding.
Same.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I think Atlanta makes the most sense. Unless I'm missing another team right now. Pittsburgh, obviously, but I don't know if that Pittsburgh makes sense. They don't have a roster that I think they believe can compete for a Super Bowl.
I think it's Minnesota, man. I think he just sticks there. If you're Minnesota, you are incentivized to keep Kirk Cousins for another year because you've got to make things work with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
And that dude is up for a contract after this year. Now, they still got franchise tags that they can use and all of that. They've got control for many years to come, but you want to keep that guy happy. And if you bring back Kirk Cousins, I think that's your best chance to keep him happy. I think they should keep Kirk Cousins on a 3-year deal, fully guaranteed. It sucks, but that's the way that you're going to have to operate with this guy at the helm. He's really good. First team All-Pro when it comes to contracts. First team All-Business in the NFL.
Attaboy.
I think you should draft a first-round quarterback this year as well. You should have your next guy ready to go, waiting in the wings. Like, this is a great J.J. McCarthy spot. McCarthy should be their developmental plan the way that the Packers did with Jordan Love. Go ahead and get that guy in place underneath Kirk Cousins now. But I think it's just back in Minnesota, man. I think that's the best spot for him.
I'm kind of with you, though I would be intrigued by Atlanta. And I think if you said, like, okay, Minnesota is going to do that game of we're not going to do the fully guaranteed, Atlanta is the team that I would keep an eye on. But I think you're right because it has Justin Jefferson written all over it, man. Like, if you're going to let Kirk walk, which, one, feels like a mistake, but two, then you've got to trade Justin Jefferson, and you've got to admit, basically, you're into a rebuild. You have to tear it down, start back from the studs, honestly go through a year from hell where you've got some kind of bridge quarterback to where then you can go draft high in the first round because you're not going to be able to move up in this year's draft, I don't think. So I think you're right. I think you just re-sign Kirk Cousins. And, like, if you have Kirk Cousins and you're the Vikings, you have arguably what? the third, fourth best quarterback in the NFC. Like, you could win something meaningful with that.
Yep.
If you're Cleveland, do you consider it?
No, you
Can't
can't.
do it.
Oh, yeah, because of Deshaun. Oh,
stuck.
God, that sucks.
Hey, I saw he's thrown again, though, in
Oh,
March.
Yeah,
good.
of course
Can't
he
wait
is.
for him not to throw in August.
This is the problem with some of these guys or some of these teams that you would think would make sense for him as a landing spot is they're stuck with what they have currently available to them. So, yeah, I don't think they have any chance otherwise. Some of the other quarterbacks that are going to make some noise this offseason, there's a report earlier today that the next contract for Dak Prescott could be worth $60 million per year.
I am so not paying that to a regular season quarterback.
So here's the problem. He has a $60 million cap hit this year. $60 million.
So I'm paying him $60 million.
Final year of his contract.
Crap.
This year. You have to extend him. If you're the Cowboys, you have basically two options. Either you eat it and you say, we're moving on from Dak Prescott after the year, because that's what you'd be saying. Or, because you also can't really do a whole lot else this offseason. It's like a $200 million cap is what you have available to you. $60 million is going to that guy.
Yeah.
You probably need to go in and give him an extension. And if you do, it's going to be for $55-60 million. Are you guys willing to do that?
I'm not, but I kind of feel like your hand is forced in this position because you're not getting a better quarterback.
Yep.
And you're not going to draft anything, and you need to win right now. I would be very hesitant to pay $60 million of a guy that is great for me through 17 games in the regular season, and then as soon as you get to the playoffs, he decombusts and you don't know what to do. Like, how you're never going to win.
I'm paying him. I'll figure it out. I've got a quarterback that is meaningful. I've got a top 10 quarterback in the league. We can disagree on where he belongs on that list, but I've got a top 10 quarterback in the league. He is somebody that I can win with right now. We just saw Jared Goff win. We've seen Brock Purdy win. Get the guys around him, get a new coach in place next year, and whenever you do all of that, you'll be able to win again. But you can't let this guy walk. And that's what you would be essentially doing if you allow him to just play out the season. And oh, by the way, you're punting on the 2024 football season if you decide to go into it with him making $60 million. You probably can't then extend somebody like CeeDee Lamb. Like, you've got a lot of stuff you got to do this offseason if you're the Cowboys. The starting point, unfortunately for them, it is giving $60 million per year to Dak Prescott.
Trade Dak for Justin Fields.
You can't. Too much for cap hit.
Yeah, dead cap.
They're stuck,
Well,
man.
guess what? Your team's going to suck then.
No, see, the funny thing is like when you said all that, and look, he has that persona right now as being a regular season quarterback. Man, I feel more handicapped by Mike McCarthy than I do Dak Prescott and extending him. So I agree with BK. I would do the extension. And I think at some point he's going to get his due in the playoffs. I really do, because you're right. He is a top 10 quarterback right now. And at some point, I think it's all going to click. It may have to wait until Mike McCarthy's gone, but I think at some point he's going to start winning in the playoffs. And you see that from some even the great quarterbacks. Wasn't it Manning that was, 0-3 or 1-3 in his first couple of years? Now, Dak's been around a little longer.
Yeah, but at least I saw Manning compete in the playoffs. Dak looks like he forgets how to play football.
You're misremembering early career Peyton Manning. His early career numbers were abysmal in the postseason. What about Jared Goff? You guys paying him? It's final year of his contracts this year. He'll be 30 years old, making $20 million, $30 million against the cap. You guys paying him?
Can I get Kirk Cousins instead?
No.
Then I guess I have to. I mean, I look, I was the biggest Detroit Lions honk this season, and frankly, they and the Houston Texans are my favorite team going into next year. But I still believe Jared Goff is a guy that could just kind of get you to that line, but can't get you across it.
I'm hopeful you can get the same contracts that he did last time. 4 years, $135 million. Can I give you like 40 a year? You're not resetting the market. You're not getting 50. You're not getting 60. Can I get you for 40 a year? Which sounds like a lot, and it is a ton of money, don't get me wrong, but given what the quarterback contracts look like nowadays, that'd be a pretty good deal, I think, for Jared Goff. So if you can get it at that, I'd be willing to do it.
Yeah, I would too. And I think with Goff, and I've said this since his time with the Rams, and I don't think they were in the wrong by giving him that contract at the time either. But I think when you have Jared Goff, if you don't have weapons around him, that line that you're talking about from going from good to great, he's not going to get over it by himself. He's not a guy like a Patrick Mahomes who can have a wide receiver room that drops every football thrown their way in the regular season and get them to a Super Bowl and win it all. He's not that guy. But if he's got the weapons like St. Brown, Sam Laporta, a good offensive line, two great running backs that can run the ball and be pass catchers, a great coordinator, he can be that guy that can get you to that great point. he's not going to be the star of it all. Detroit thinks he is, but he's not. But he can do it when you've got the weapons around him. So I think, you have to pay him, and you just hope that you keep the weapons with him as long as possible.
Our next one, this is going to be one of the guys that determines the offseason, or that changes the course of the offseason. It is the first year that 2021 NFL draft players are eligible for extensions. Now, that includes the number 1 overall pick that year, Trevor Lawrence. He still has his 5th-year option next year. After that, you could franchise tag him for 2 more seasons if you wanted to, if you were the Jaguars. So they still technically have 3 years of control over Trevor Lawrence beyond 2024. So there's 4 years left under his quote-unquote status with the team. Would you be ready to extend him this offseason if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars?
You want to hold hands? Oh, okay.
Oh,
so
you want to hold hands
and say this together? No.
Hell no. I'm going to pay you as little money as possible until I can't pay you as little money as possible again, and then we're moving on.
I think they're going to do it.
I think Miami's going to do it too, and I think both are mistakes.
What is happening right now? Why are we signing all these average quarterbacks?
I think they believe that Trevor Lawrence is the real deal. Now, I don't know if they're right or not.
Man, we must watch 2 different football
I was going to say, I love the evidence that you're trying to show me to argue he's the real deal.
I mean, over the last 2 seasons, he's been really solid. I have continued. I go all the way back to his time at Clemson. I think he's good. I've never seen the next great thing that everybody else seemed to. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the NFL that's thrown this to the side, but I thought Deshaun Watson was better and more impressive at Clemson than Trevor Lawrence was. Same offense, obviously different teammates and whatnot, but I was more impressed by Deshaun and his time there than I was by Trevor Lawrence in his time at Clemson. And then the same thing was kind of true in their first few seasons in the NFL. I was more impressed by what Deshaun did with the Texans on the field than I have been with what Trevor Lawrence has done with the Jaguars on the field in the first few years. So they seem to believe in him. I do think he's going to get extended this offseason, and I think it's going to be for an extraordinary amount of money, but I would not do it. I would wait 1 more year. I would eventually give him the money, but I want to see it for a full season of him being consistent before.
A lot of teams that just say, you know what, let's just be average. That's all we need. It'd be average. Especially in the AFC, where it is dominated by like franchise-altering quarterbacks.
All of these dudes we just talked about are going to get paid more than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
All of them.
And welcome to why the Chiefs continue to win, ladies and
100%.
gentlemen.
And this offseason, the Chiefs have an opportunity to essentially extend, quote-unquote, Mahomes with a $35 million cap hit that's just pushed into future years. Like, they could basically use the money that they were going to pay Mahomes on a roster bonus and just put it towards, L'Jarius Sneed and then a wide receiver as well.
I mean,
props to you, Casey.
meanwhile, you got Jacksonville going, hey, let's give Trevor Lawrence like $60 million.
Yeah, it was good. Trevor Lawrence, we should make him the highest paid quarterback.
Let's be honest, we're paying for the flow than we are the play on the football field.
True.
It's crazy how quickly that turned, right?
Like, could you just imagine in the AFC if you're a GM and a coach and you're like, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. We should pay Trevor Lawrence, right?
Or
That's
Tua.
where we should go.
The following players already have a higher average annual value than Patrick Mahomes: Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson.
Good.
After this offseason, you'll probably be able to add Dak Prescott to that list. Jared Goff maybe we'll see to that list. Who else did we talk? Trevor Lawrence to that list.
Tua.
Kirk Cousins maybe to that
Yeah.
list. Tua potentially to that list. He'll be like 8th or 9th in the NFL in an average annual
Mahomes
value
should
after this
demand
offseason.
an extension or request a trade.
Coming up next, is there any fixing the All-Star games? Or are we officially too far gone with the way that these are being operated? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it's time to unlock your inner champion today. Hormone optimization can help you achieve that optimal vitality and longevity, and to do so, go to victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. When you get over there, they'll tell you about all of the different things that they can do to help you feel your best self again. They've got 4 different locations across the St. Louis metro area, one in O'Fallon, Illinois, another in O'Fallon, Missouri, and then Town and Country, Missouri, and their new location in Sunset Hills, Missouri as well. For the exact locations, go to victorymenshealth.com. If it's easier for you, though, to get a telehealth option, they are offering that to residents in both Illinois and Missouri, and the process is going to be super easy. Go to the website, victorymenshealth.com, click on the telehealth tab up on the upper right corner. From there, you pick the service that you're most interested in. Maybe that's weight loss, hormones, micronutrient testing, and based on the service that you're interested in, they will ship that lab draw kit directly to your home, and when they get the results, and those are in, they'll do a video telehealth consult with you to review those results. It's all super easy. It's available to you at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues made a couple of roster moves about 30 minutes ago as they have placed Justin Falk on LTIR. They have put Scott Buchnevich on IR as well, and they have recalled forward Zachary Bolduc from the AHL. And Zachary Bolduc, what you think would make his debut Thursday when the Blues take on the New York Islanders? Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey joins Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
What do you do? What do you do to save the All-Star games? That's the question at hand. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. I don't think there is any way to do so, Alex. I think All-Star games were a creation when we were growing up of not seeing these other teams as often as we do today. If I want to go watch the Golden State Warriors, I can do it tonight, tomorrow night, the next night. Every night they're on television. I can find a way to put them on my TV at home here in St. Louis. In baseball, right? If I want to watch every single game, all 162 games of the New York Yankees, guess what? That's an option for me as well. In the NFL, if I want to watch every play of every game, guess what? I can do exactly that. And so the value as a fan of being able to see the best of the best going up against one another, or just even being able to watch them, isn't what it was as recently as 10, 15, 20 years ago when those options weren't available to you. There was a time not all that long ago, man, where, like, this is going to the college game, but as a Missouri football fan, there were games that they played at the beginning of the year that were on pay-per-view that I literally did not watch because it was unavailable to me at my home.
Tebow, remember pay-per-view?
Like,
No.
It was crazy. There were games that were literally unavailable. I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, and I couldn't watch the Mizzou football game because it wasn't on television. It's pretty recent that all college games have become available. So when I think about what's wrong with the All-Star games, why don't these mean as much as they once did? It's because all of this is available to us at our fingertips every single night. So that's the viewer side of things. On the player side of things, they just don't care, man. I can't tell you why, when this happened, how it happened. I saw an interview the other night that was recorded with Kobe Bryant. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago, where he was talking about how the All-Star game mattered to him. And he didn't want to lose when he got into the All-Star game. And that's not just some, like, made-up thing. No, I remember watching Kobe against LeBron. Yep. And it felt like it mattered in that moment that those two guys were going head-to-head. Or early in his career, Kobe going up against Michael. And it was like, all right, this matters, right? It doesn't feel that way anymore. And I don't know why or when that happened or what changed to make it that way. But we have now arrived in a place where the NFL said, you know what, screw it. It's not working anymore. Let's play games and a flag football game instead of doing the Pro Bowl. And if you guys want to watch, cool. But that's really all this is going to be about. Baseball still has a weekend that works. Because baseball, unlike these other sports, you don't have to be running or sprinting or anything like that to make it worth watching. It's just a pitch, a hit, boom, we're done. And the pitchers are in there for 1 inning, and then we all go about our business. Alex, do you think there's any way to save this weekend?
No, there's not. I think you're starting to see teams. You mentioned the NFL being one of them, but look at the NHL. Now, I know the NHL is doing this, at least they say, because they're prepping teams for what the Olympics are going to look like the next year. So they're doing the World Face-Off or whatever they're doing. Let's be honest. Gary Bettman's like, this makes us no money. Nobody cares. Let's go do where 4 countries play against each other. That will spark some interest. I would almost go out on a limb to say that within the next couple of years, the NHL won't have an All-Star weekend. They'll have kind of what this is, face-off between 4 different countries, and that will get the excitement. There's just not a way to salvage it because, one, the players would much rather be on vacation and take the week off than go participate in an All-Star game and deal with the media side of it and all of that. Yep. But, two, like, as a fan, there's just no interest. Like I was telling you guys in the office, I used to love baseball's All-Star game because there was something incentivizing it. Like it was the World Series home field advantage.
I was on the opposite side of this. I hated it.
I thought it
was so stupid.
I was probably in the minority when it came to that, but at least it was something to watch for. When hockey used to do, what was it, North America versus the world, that was exciting. And when it was 5 on 5.
Was that because you were a kid, or was that because it was actually exciting?
I thought it was exciting, and I don't know, because I was like 8, 9 years old.
Right.
But like, if I were to ask the players today, that there probably was more competition to that than just, oh, well, it's Metropolitan versus the Pacific versus the Central. Like, who cares?
See, I don't think that ever had any appeal in the NHL. I think it was the only reason baseball had the appeal was because, like, why did those guys have to play? Because it might affect their team because of the home field advantage. And I know a lot of people didn't like it, and I know baseball moved away from it. I thought it worked because it forced those guys to actually play in that game.
Yeah, there was something that incentivized it.
And I just don't see that anymore. And to your point,
I don't think it does.
Players cared back then. Like, you mentioned Kobe and, like, LeBron. Like, they cared.
It's a different mindset.
You know, and maybe that was it, too, when you're to your point of, like, the NHL All-Star Game years ago when it was North America versus the world. Like, maybe those guys cared.
There was internal competition because you were representing your country in an all-star game, whereas nobody, like, I don't think the players really care about representing their division for an all-star game.
I don't think anybody cares about any of it. That's where I'm at. I think the players have just said, none of this matters, so why am I going to try? And then when a few of those guys, like that were the best players in the world, started to have that mindset, it contaminated everything, and it's now gotten to the point where, dude, the NBA's All-Star Game is unwatchable. They have to scrap it. I don't know what it's going to be in the future, but, like, dude, Luka Doncic took a shot yesterday, 2 days ago, I guess it would have been, from like 3/4 court with 40 seconds left in the first half.
Oh, maybe those are extra points.
For no reason. It was just, it was absurd. Like, that was the moment where I said, I'm turning it off. And I'm a guy that actually liked the NBA's All-Star Game up until 2 years ago. The last 2 seasons, what they've had at that product has been so off-putting for me as a fan. I like the NBA. I'm just kind of repulsed by it. Now, the part of the NBA weekend, though, for All-Star that still did matter to a degree was the other events, right? Slam dunk contest, three-point competition. And the three-point competition is still something that is the one event that has a little something there. There is a little bit of juice with it because the best players in the world still want to participate, and they'll go in and they actually try to compete. Steph wants to be a part of it. Those kinds of things are cool. The slam dunk contest is over. We don't need to do it anymore. The stars don't do it. Even if they did do it, we would watch the dunks and we'd be like, I've seen that. I've seen that. I've seen that.
Yeah, you can't really change dunks anymore.
There's nothing left. We've conquered the dunk.
Yes.
The thing about the dunk contest is there's nothing left for us to accomplish. You want to see somebody jump over a 7'6" individual? Guess what? We've seen that before. You want to see somebody dunk not only from the free throw line, but beyond it? Guess what? We've seen that before. You want to see somebody dunk after they put the ball off of the back of the backboard? Guess what? We've seen all of this done before.
It's amazing.
There's just nothing left out there that will capture our imagination as basketball fans. So it's not just that, hey, LeBron's not participating, Giannis not participating. Even if they were, guys, we would still be criticizing their dunks and being like, yeah, this is not all that interesting or entertaining to us anymore.
That's like hockey with the skills. Like, I've seen enough of guys skate fast around the rink. It's like, cool, congrats. I've seen a lot of the hardest shots in terms of the National Hockey League. Like, there's just, and it's no disrespect.
It's about personality. The last thing that can save these things is personality, and I just don't think guys care enough to really want to add that into what they're doing.
You weren't getting personality while, like, they were, like, walking and holding hands up the court yesterday.
They were holding
Sunday.
hands?
No, but, like,
fun.
it would have made it more enjoyable.
I'm talking about the event side of things. Like, one of the things that I think MLB does really well, the personalities of players comes out during the home run derby. Like, you can see it. Everybody's on the field. Everybody's gathered together. Like, it's a big deal. Dude, it was boring as hell during the dunk contest. Like, there was nothing that was particularly appealing about it. Now, during the three-point contest, you saw a little bit of the personalities come out. You saw people getting a little more involved. That was it, man. That was the only thing that had any sort of appeal to me over the weekend. The NFL side of things, I think you do see a little bit more of the personality comes out, and that's because all they're doing is these games, and they're just basically getting a free weekend
because
in Vegas.
They took it off, and well, that's the other thing too. Like, a lot of these places where you're going to different cities and doing it, these guys don't want to go to freaking Washington for their All-Star break.
You don't think they wanted to go to Indianapolis this past weekend?
I think if you put it every year in Vegas, if you put it in Florida, then teams are going to be like, yep, if you do an All-Star game every single season in Cozumel, Mexico, I think people are like, hell yes, let's go.
Yeah, but then they get there and they're like, oh, I actually have to do stuff while I'm here.
I don't want to do this.
I don't want to be a part of it. The Rewind is next. All right, big news today for the St. Louis Blues is that they have called up Zachary Bolduc. They put in corresponding moves. Scott Perunovich on IR. They put Justin Falk on LTR. Alex, what did you make of this move?
So I think it's because they need offense. Not I think. They need offense specifically in their top 9 where Kasperi Kapanen and Sammy Blais have been doing it. So I looked at this. So since January 1st, Zachary Bolduc has played 18 total games for the Springfield Thunderbirds. In those 18 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 total points, a -1, and had 40 shots on goal. Combined, 26 games played since January 1st between Kapanen and Sammy Blais. They have combined for 3 assists, no goals, a -2, and combined for 24 total shots on goal.
Well, there you go. That's what
You need
got
offense, and Bolduc's bringing it.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. We'll have plenty more on this move tomorrow for you guys. Going to be breaking down a little bit of the bullpen for the Cardinals as well. If you guys getting some hype out at Cardinals camp, and Cardinals unofficially announced that Sonny Gray is going to be their opening day starter. So we'll discuss what all of that means for you guys tomorrow on the show. For Alex and T-Bone on BK, we'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.